Okay, thank you, Mike, and thank you, Amanda. Mover and a seconder for special committee of the whole minutes, November 15th, 2022. Deputy Mayor Madeira Voss, can you read that?
I move that we approve the special committee of the whole minutes for November 15th, 2022.
And a seconder, please. Councillor McKay, I saw your hand. I may have heard somebody else's voice, but we've got lots more minutes to do. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And second to the last, a mover for special committee of the whole minutes of November 17th, 2022. Councillor Elliott.
I would like to move the approval of the special committee of the whole minutes of November 17th, 2022.
And Councillor Butler second. Any errors or omissions? Additions? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes of November 17th, committee of the whole, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? And that's passed. And the last one is a mover and a seconder for special committee of the whole in camera minutes of November 17th, 2022. Councillor McKay.
Okay, I would move the minutes of November 17th, 2022, special committee of the whole in camera meeting be approved as circulated.
Thank you. And a seconder, please. Councillor Ingham. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Those are passed. That was a lot of minutes. That's a lot of meetings, and that wasn't all. That was just committee of the whole. I just have a few comments. This is being November 6th. It has been just over 30 years since December 6th, 1989, when an act of that ended in the deaths of 14 young women at Polytechnique Montreal. That led our parliament to designate December 6th as the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. There is Barb Shaw has a Facebook post that was gone on the town's website this morning to commemorate those young women and bring attention to this day. So that should be up, and maybe councillors would like to repost it so that it's well distributed in our community. So we remember those young women, and they are in our thoughts, and as are their families and all other young women who have met similar fates. So that brings us to public input. And Amanda, are there any people online who would like to join us for public input?
I'm not seeing any at this time.
And are there any members of the public who would like to come in for public input? So we do not have public input today. That brings us to committee reports. I will just go around to the chairs of those committees and ask if they wish to add anything additional. And I understand that the PAC, which I don't, oh, I do see that report is going to be verbal. So, but it's not your turn yet. Okay. So Councillor Ingham, Accessibility Advisory Committee.
No, just as submitted.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor Madeira Voss, Planning Advisory Committee, you were going to give a verbal report.
Yes, my apologies for not submitting the written report on time. I take full responsibility for that. We had a very short agenda for the last PAC meeting. We had one item, and it was encouraging to see how much public interest there was in this particular at this particular meeting. We had several speakers, and I think it was good to see how many people were able to get that information in advance.
What was the topic?
So the topic was we're focusing on short-term rentals. I'm just getting these things mixed up, sorry. Short-term rentals, single room occupancy, and a review of whether or not we would have the a registry, a landlord registry. So those were the three main items. And the decision was that we were not going to make any changes to those policies at this time.
I believe there's also a presentation on the East End development at that meeting.
Yes, sorry, I apologize. Yes, we did have a fairly comprehensive presentation on the East End development as an update. But the focus of this meeting was to give an update on all of those items. There was no motion that came forward from that meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Butler, source water, anything to add to that?
The only comment I wanted to make, it being my first and probably my last hurrah at source water, it was a great meeting. It was. At the very end of my notes, we had scheduled the meeting for January 23rd from 12:30 to 1:30, but on the new schedule, that will probably change. That's the only change in that.
Thanks, Councillor Butler. And Policing Services Review Committee, which I did.
Yeah, I wasn't at that,
looking
so.
I wrote that. Yes, the CAO was away. I did those minutes. I have nothing to add if there are any questions on that. We do have another meeting on Friday of this week, and we are moving speedily ahead. I would note for council that there are, Barb has put on the Wolfville blooms in the section on the policing services review some very excellent documents. They are not short reads, but if you have some reading time that you'd like to dig into that, I found them very informative and would certainly suggest that council at least take a cursory look at the ones, particularly the ones that came out of these are American President's Council in 2015. I found quite an eye opener, a bit overwhelming, but worth taking a look at. And that moves us to, if there are no questions on that, it moves us to the CAO report.
So just a couple things to highlight. The first is that we completed our Cherry Lane well installation last week. Yay. So that is now functioning, and Alex was able to lift the conservation advisory last week. So that's been welcome news. Additionally, Highland Avenue is proceeding. We're off temporary water now. Gravels are going in. The mayor and our compliance officer did door-to-doors with all the residents last week just to give an update on the project and where we were at, and also give information on what they can do, re their parking situation if there's any concerns. I think that went over quite well. So hopefully we'll get that wrapped up for this year, and we'll be able to move forward on that. And then I did get an update from Barb that I'm just going to look and read. So as of right now, we're at 482 votes cast in our election, which is just under 12% of eligible voters. So we'll keep encouraging people to vote. You have until Friday to vote online, and then Saturday in person. So those are the three things that I wanted to highlight. I don't know if anyone has any questions for my report.
Councillor
Oh,
Ingram?
sorry, that was still on, but I do have a question. I'm just going through here. Can you, this is the first I heard about it, like the off-oil program is still available. And then you said there's homes in the zones that have been identified as posing potential contamination risk to the Wolfville water supply. That's just new to me. Can you explain that a
Yeah,
little bit more?
so when we went into the PACE program a couple of years ago, we had it open to anybody to apply, but we had a targeted grant program of $4,000 for folks that were in our well field protection zone. So if they were on oil and wanted to convert to a different source, heat pump primarily, they were eligible for a grant of up to $4,000 to help with that. So when we finished the PACE program and council made that decision a number of months ago, we did decide that we were still continuing with that. There's still money there for those folks that are in that area that's been identified if they want to do the conversion. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
And the off-oil correspondence just went out at the end of last week, so the outreach from the PACE folks has occurred. So now we're awaiting word on interest in that particular portion.
So I guess when I heard contamination, you just say potential contamination, like there, like that, okay.
Yeah, potential contamination where you have oil sources near the well field protection zone.
Okay,
So
where the
yeah,
well field is,
it's-
okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's a preventative measure
Okay.
as opposed to reactive.
okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. That's good. Okay, thank you.
So anyone that's in that area that hasn't made that change, you can still access that grant funding if you.
Councillor McKay?
Thank you. Just on Highland, so because the asphalt plants close in like 10 days typically, will we hit pavement on that before that closes?
I'll just turn to
Or that's
Alex for the
finished.
latest update on that.
Yeah, I can answer that. So the contractor for Highland has a working agreement with Dexter's, who's typically the supplier of the asphalt. Because the weather's actually been good for the last I don't know, couple of months. There's no snow on the ground yet, so they'll keep the asphalt plant open for at least until the end of the what they need for the project here. They've got that agreement. They're not just gonna shut it down as of a specific date. If they were gonna do that, they would communicate that to the contractor too.
Okay.
So we would know about it by now. So they're confident they're gonna get the at least the surface lift paved in that upper section of Highland. So
And just a follow-up question. So if there are, and I walked it last night, that's why I was curious because it's still quite. Yeah, pity. What's the word? I'm like, it's quite a drop. When you go into individuals or the parking, like the driveways of people, because I think I have heard that some have been damaged, of course, just due to trucks going in and out of them too and back around. But so will they be fixed before, will we be fixing those for them? Because if they get a plow in, I would presume that they are going to be very damaged come spring. And are we going to be the person who fixes those for them? That was a question I had.
are you talking about the road as it is now is kind of sunken down?
Well, that is true. When I walked it last night, but you could see where, because it is so far down and the driveways were
Yeah.
clearly higher than that before. So now that's all crumbled in their driveway and sort of coming down. Will we be fixing their driveway as well? And I believe the one where the laundromat kind of is, that they went in, the trucks went in there quite a bit. And I believe it's not in as good a shape as it was before, which makes sense. But so will we be taking that on, or does the owner need to reach out? What happens in that instance?
No, the road is being built back up to grade with the road gravel installation. So the slopes into the driveways are gonna be probably the same as whatever they were before the project started.
Okay,
And the ramps into the driveways will be repaired as part of the contract. That's part of the scope of work.
okay. And if they went further into the driveway, because I think that was a good turning around spot for them,
Mhm.
which is reasonable. If that's damaged, will we be fixing that as well? Or
If-
does that?
If that was the case, if they used any private property for access for turning vehicles around or storing equipment,
Yeah.
it's the contractor's obligation to restore that to better that at least or better than what it was before.
Okay, so if there is an issue, someone should reach out.
Yeah,
If
if
it's
someone's not happy with how the contractor has restored their private property, then yes, they should reach out to me.
Perfect, thank you. Can I ask about the winter parking ban? So it started on.
That's not part of our parking update.
It's been as a CEO report I can get.
Okay, yeah, it was in both, so I wasn't
Okay.
sure. So it started on December 1st. And it's after midnight towing, correct? Because I was out for a walk on Saturday night. I was trying to think, I was on your street, that's why I'm looking at you. And there were cars parked on the side of the street, and I met John on the street, and he was giving warnings. So I was surprised that they were getting warnings, because it was a beautiful evening at 8 p.m. and it's the holiday season. There's going to be lots of people out visiting one another, one would hope. So if it's a warning, can I suggest we call them friendly reminders as opposed to putting tickets and warnings on people's cars? If that's what was happening?
So I would have to check with Sean to see what was happening. I know that he has been going out in the first couple of weeks. He and Kaden are focusing more on warnings than tickets. As we move into the season, we're going to be focused more on tickets if it's not a snow event, but if folks are our parking overnight. If it's a snow event, likely the towing will have to happen to help with the snow clearing. And the friendly ticket, and Kaden is here, he can speak to it. It's got the little happy face and it basically just says, you know, this is what the rules are in Wolfville. You may be, you would have gotten a ticket if we didn't give you the warning, but 8 o'clock seems odd. So I will let you speak to that because I don't know the circumstances.
So he was out giving warnings, and that's typically what we agreed on, to give that extra advertisement maybe for when people who may not check the social medias or the websites or be aware. But if we want to switch that, they did look like tickets, but they did have warning on the bottom, and we usually write something. But if we want to change that to something maybe more friendly, or just a notice, a reminder, like you said, we can definitely draft something.
At midnight, I don't have a
Yeah.
problem with a warning with a
If he was-
smiley face.
if-
At 8 o'clock,
Yeah,
I
if-
thought that was a
Yeah.
little excessive.
Yeah, sorry, if he was at 8 o'clock, then I'll reach out to him, because he shouldn't have been at 8. Past midnight, between midnight and 6 is fair. But I'll double check.
Yeah, we'll get the circumstance. Yeah, because
I
midnight
just
to
was
6.
afraid because walking
Yeah.
the dog with Cooper, and I was
Yeah,
like,
that's
it
too
was definitely early, so because
And it may have been another infraction, maybe that wasn't related to winter parking, and they may have been
definitely
parked
did
in an
another one
area.
on that street
Yeah.
too, but
They may have not been able to park in that location regardless, so we'll get
and
the,
maybe I got his story wrong, like, he was ticketing one for sure, but they were parked on the wrong side, so that was absolutely fair. So maybe I got his communication wrong, but just.
we'll
check.
clarify, because that's a good point.
Thank you. Any other questions of the CAO? Okay, thank you. That moves us into staff reports for discussion, and the first one is council and committees of council schedule, which we have in our package. Erin, did you want to
Yes,
speak
I
to that?
And I lost it, so I'll just speak to it up here right now so that it's easy. Yeah, so every year before January, we do provide a schedule of all of our meetings as we know them going forward into the next fiscal year. That's a really helpful tool for counselors to be able to plan their year and vacations and all of those things. And later in the agenda, you'll see that we have the council committee appointments as well, which will give a little bit of certainty around which committees everyone is responsible for, so you can plan. So everything should be laid out well for you. Just to highlight, January and September, we will have committee of the whole the second week of the month instead of the first. We typically do that in January anyway, because we're coming off the break and it's difficult to get the package out. But in September, it was noted this year that was also difficult because a lot of staff do take holidays in August where we don't have meetings, and it's hard to come back after the long weekend and be prepared for that. So we've shifted the schedules in both of those months with COW and council. We've done an adjustment for the AMA conference as well, just to allow staff to attend that. Those were the big ones. Mike did make some notes in the RFD related to audit and a backup date for the audit committee meeting. So that's been addressed. Other than that, I think it should be pretty straightforward. We've also moved the full all-day COW meeting from September to October. So all the changes that council gave feedback on have been highlighted. I just wanted to note that the February full COW session, we're going to use for budget as well. And we'll really dig into the ops plan at that point. So that's a really timely one that will allow us to have a bit more time to spend time on that. Otherwise, I think it's pretty straightforward. If there's any questions, let me know.
My only question was, we had been having full day COW sessions every other month, and your reasoning for going to quarterly. And part of why I'm asking that, I know if we're going to use it for budget in February, I thought we were going to do a housing session one afternoon of COW, and I thought we were going to do that early in the year.
So I'm just checking. So we have a full COW day on February the 7th. So that would be the first one. And we were talking about the housing. I think we were waiting one of the counselors to bring a request for agenda item that was going to allow us to talk about that and give direction. But the thought would be, there's a lot of discussion happening around housing sort of offline. And I know counselors are really wanting to talk about that. So we were looking to schedule a special session so that we can talk about housing, and that will allow us to inform the ops plan in terms of what you'd like to see. Then we go back to a full COW day, April of 2023. Then we have another one in June. So then the only switch is instead of having the full cow day in September, we've moved it to October so that's our next one. And then we go back to another one in the next year. So if you wanted to add, full day to any of the others, it wasn't intentional to go to quarterly. It was just
Okay.
how,
Okay, my question was really if the February one was used for budget, when do we schedule like, a housing one, but we'll deal with, that could be a special.
yeah, I was thinking that would be a special one. I was
Fair
looking
enough.
for direction. So I think that there'll be likely a request for agenda item in January related to housing is my understanding. And so we can have a discussion and if the direction to move forward is given by council, we can schedule
Okay,
something
fair
for. Yeah.
Councillor Elliott.
In addition to housing, I had put in a request for agenda item on basic income.
I don't think that would be a special committee.
No, but I mean,
Yeah.
it could go in there if we wanted to. Just a
Yeah,
thought.
I thought that was a letter, so I did not see that as a, yeah,
Yeah.
yes. Councillor McKay.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have any problem with the way it's laid out. My question is, so there's this one that has it, thank you. That's all great. And then the calendar is laid out afterwards. So just in terms of flow, this comes out, then we pick our committee which we'll have a discussion with later, which may or may be fine, just the way it is. But then it gives the times, which I thought when we talked about our committees and then and then tied together with the attendance policy, that this was sort of up to the committees. It would be quarterly, like it would be whatever this says, but the actual times could change depending on who's on your committee. So I just wondered if this was early in the stages of discussion, or if this is a guideline and we'll change it should one need to.
This is a guideline based on how the committees currently operate. So if the committee composition changes and it's deemed that you want to move or change it, then that's fine, as long as it meets the terms of reference and we can update it at that point. But this is what
And
we
then just
know
update.
now based
Okay.
on how it operates currently.
Okay, that's great. Just
All right, are we good? There's a motion. If we have no more questions, if somebody would like to move this motion. Councillor Elliott.
I would move that council adopt the 2023 council and committees of council meeting schedule as presented in RFD 067-2022.
Thanks, Councillor Elliott, and a second.
That would be preceded by that committee of the whole recommend that council so that it moves forward.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you,
Mike.
Deputy Mayor. Are there any other comments or questions about that? All those in favor of the motion as read, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, that is passed. RFD 062-2022 additional video camera. Is that, are you going to do that or Kaden?
And
All right, good morning.
Morning.
Thank you. So we're just bringing forward the request. We had two requests for 2 additional video cameras within our pilot. So we're just going to speak to that. And then there's also the request from myself to relocate 1 camera that's currently existing. So our cameras have been active now for just over 3 months, since August 25th. And we've been using them quite often now. It's getting quite busy with a lot of, recently there's been a lot of vehicle hit and runs and thefts and stuff. So we've got some complaints with the RCMP coming over requesting footage. So they are being used, but we're still very early in the pilot. So it's too early to give the evaluation at this point, but they are utilized, that's for sure. Yeah. So the 2 requests that came in, there's one up on Sherwood Drive and there's one on Balcom. So I'm going to address those, give the 2 options and the recommendation as well. So these requests came a few months ago in the late summer, early fall, regarding some vandalism and property damage that happened around these areas. So they're very warranted for those, but we also have to take into account the pilot, where we're at, what's going on, and also the policy that was created, making sure we're addressing it properly and not just putting up the cameras. So I'll just go forward. So within this, I am recommending removing one that is on Bay Street. Just when we put it up, we weren't fully aware of the scope of the camera, the quality, the distance, that sort of thing. So now that we're 3 months in, having a lot of time to review that footage, moving that camera westward 1 pole would be very beneficial to capture the area that was originally intended. And then for the placement on Balcom Drive and Sherwood Drive, the 2 that were requested, I am recommending to reconsider these after the pilot, just where we are really early. It's 3 months in. We haven't had our evaluation periods yet and how we're going to feel after the end of the pilot. We don't want to add 2 more cameras when we don't know the final outcome. So, and by the time we potentially say yes to this, council can still say yes to this if you wish. But that's just our recommendation. And by the time sourcing, supply chains, we get them, it could be another few months either way and towards the end of the pilot.
Thank you, Kaden. Are there any questions of staff from council? Deputy Mayor Madeira?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, no. Any comments from council? Councillor McKay?
So it's to move the one on Bay, which seems
Correct.
reasonable if that's the way, if staff feel that's the best option. And I mean, we place them in the best places we think at the time and then move them as needed. And then wait a little bit on the other 2, which I don't have a problem with either, because I want to be conscientious that I think these cameras are great, but they're not home security things either. So I was concerned
Yep.
when I read that I didn't want them to be used for that purpose. But if we're going to wait a little bit and then see how that goes, then I'd be fine with it. Thank you.
Other comments?
Like, I also want to note on your point also, the camera the policy we drafted in March that was passed, it does have the point where we have to take other measures before putting the camera up. So that's what we have been doing. The vandalism here, the last one that was reported to us was in late September. And since then, we've increased patrols for compliance. We've encouraged our CMP presence and also for the homeowner themselves, maybe to put the home security themselves, some signage. And I know some have hired their own private security. So actions have been taken. It's just, we haven't seen anything since. So if that's working, great. But towards the end, it's still a very viable option. So.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Councillor Ingham?
Sorry, maybe I just missed this, but I just needed clarification. So the one that's recommended on Balcom Drive and Sherwood Drive, you're saying, okay, so we're how many months into this pilot project
Just
right
over
now?
3.
Just over 3, and it's a year pilot project, right?
Correct.
And so how long to get the cameras again for the other sites? We already have the one for Bay, so that
Yeah,
could
that
be
one's-
done fairly quickly because you just need to remove it. But
Yeah.
these are 2 additional cameras.
Correct.
So
So-
when did you say we get them and how long would that be?
Timeline, I'm not 100% sure. I've talked to livable cities who get sources the cameras. It could be a couple weeks, it could be up to a month, depending on their supply chain, what they're working with. They did let me know that if we do decide to add the 2 additional cameras, they would put it at the top of their list to make sure we get that fairly quickly as we are in a pilot. So they want to ensure we have everything we need for the pilot. But they're also limited as well as to how quickly they can get those.
So we don't know how many months that would be included in the year. So just getting them up, it could be
another.
It could
2
be,
months, 3
yeah.
months.
Yeah, which is why we're recommending that we not do it.
Yeah,
as
okay,
part
that's
of
what I
the
just,
pilot.
that's what I
Yeah.
was thinking. That just
Yeah.
didn't make sense. Okay. yeah.
Because when we did this initially, council approved moving forward in mid-spring and we weren't able to get them up until the end of August just because of delays in supply chain. So if that gives you a perspective, it was 4 or 5 months before, from the time
Yeah.
you approved it to the time they went up.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I have commented. Yes, I hadn't thought of the comment that Councillor McKay meant in terms of being people's home security. I think that's a really good point, and it may be that these areas and other areas warrant it, but I think it's good to stay the course.
Yep.
I'm glad that other initiatives are being taken to deal with that. And one of my concerns when I first read this, I wasn't quite clear whether we were recommending it or not, was how many other people might come out and say,
Yeah.
well, we would like one. And then
Yeah.
once you have, this is kind of a precedent, I'm not sure how what we would do for the next one. So I do support this motion. And Councillor Elliott.
Thank you. I think we should stay the course as well. I'm just interested to know about the one on Main Street.
Sure.
Do you get much footage that's interesting from there?
So the main street at the moment, we had issues putting it up. So right now it only activates and records nightfall. So as soon as it hits dusk night, it starts to record. But we're currently in the works with Nor'easter Electric, who came down and serviced all of them for us. So we did have a good quote from Brad Roy to change the photo cells on Main Street so that that camera would activate 24/7. So that one, it's not used as much. I don't have many complaints coming in for activity on Main Street during the evening. So it is active. It's recording during the nighttime into the early morning, but it hasn't been as utilized as maybe some others.
Yeah, it was linked to the light sensor, which wasn't picked up until after the pilot, so that it goes on with the timing of the light. So
Yeah.
that will be rectified and we'll have the daytime coverage too.
It is. So, yeah.
Shows why a pilot is important. All these little things that you wouldn't know until you tried it out. If there are no other questions or comments, I will refer council, the motion list that was passed out does have that little intro committee of the whole pass. So if you go from that rather than from the screen, it's probably will be better. And would somebody like to move this motion? Deputy Mayor, dear boss.
Yes, I would move the committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision. The council approve the relocation of the video camera on Bay Street and consider the placement of additional cameras on Balcom Drive and Sherwood Drive after the pilot is complete and noted in RFD 062-2022.
Councillor Butler, are there any other comments or questions? All right, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, and that is passed. And we come to the RFD 076-2022 Equity, Diversion and Inclusion. And
We do have an info report. Sorry, first, just the parking updates.
Oh, sorry, that wasn't info. I have to go back and forth between two documents. Parking updates, info report. Is Alex going to do that?
Okay, so we have the third quarter 2022-23 parking review and updates that have come out of that. I want to start by saying that it's been a little while since we've done one of these, so there are probably more updates in this report than will be normal for these quarterly reviews. I guess some of these issues have kind of built up over probably years, and we're addressing them now. So I'm going to go through these one by one here. We have updates on Hillside, Main Street, Roby Tufts and Marsh Hawk, and Willow Ave. Blomidon Terrace is getting improved signage, so there's no actual updates to the parking restrictions. Some new signage at the East End Events Lawn, and Town Hall is getting new signage and pavement marking, as well as a fire lane being added to the library. So I'll start with Hillside here. Hillside is being refreshed. So parts of Hillside are already signed as no parking or have been signed as no parking in the past. Such as the north side of Hillside, in the picture here, north is actually toward the left side of the photo. The bottom of Hillside, where it's that really steep slope, was previously signed as no parking. This is being refreshed again. Not sure what happened to the signage down there, why it was removed. There's no record of that, but that signage is being reinstalled on the west side of the street from the driveway of Civic 14 northward to Prospect. The east side of the street, we made the decision to sign that entire side of the street as no parking to get people all parking on the same side. The many parts of the street, many sections of that street are not sufficiently wide to have cars parked on both sides at the same time, and it poses a safety hazard for vehicles turning onto Hillside from Bay Street and Fairfield and the driveways along Hillside. Because it's such a steep hill, it causes some poor sightline, poor visibility for people who are trying to get out onto Hillside. So we made the decision to sign that entire east side as no parking to get everybody parking onto the west side. Any questions on Hillside before I move on?
Looking good.
Yeah. I'll try and go through these quickly. Main Street is pretty straightforward. There were two street parking spots between Seaview and Willow, where the curvature of the road kind of begins there in front of 292 Main on the other side. Because of that curvature, it's very difficult to see coming out of Willow Ave. This was brought to our attention by a local resident, and we went out there and evaluated that and agreed that with vehicles parked there, especially larger vehicles, it's very difficult to see traffic coming down Main Street to know when it's safe to turn out onto Main Street from Willow. And that, in combination with the crosswalk being at that intersection, we made this decision to get rid of those two parking spots right before Willow. These will likely be painted and hatched on the ground, similar to the other no parking zones on Main Street when we do our line painting next year. Roby Tufts and Marsh Hawk Drive. We are making Roby Tufts on both sides, no parking. And that first section between Blue Heron Court and Roby Tufts on Marsh Hawk, we're making that no parking as well. Similar to Hillside, there's insufficient street width for vehicles to be parking on both sides. And there is no one side of that street that's better than the other when it comes to sightline visibility, because there's a crest coming up the hill on Roby Tufts that makes it very difficult to see if someone's getting out of a vehicle and crossing midway up Roby Tufts, if someone's getting out of their vehicle or they're standing at their vehicle, or if compliance is out, it's very difficult to see. So we made the decision to get rid of parking on both sides of Roby Tufts. And that first section of Marsh Hawk is kind of chaotic, and people park around that curve. They park right out on the road around that curve, and it causes drivers to have to go all the way out into oncoming traffic to make that corner onto Roby Tufts. So that's another very, very dangerous spot for both drivers and pedestrians. So we're getting rid of the parking on both sides of Roby Tufts and Marsh Hawk as well. Any questions about that one?
Oh, Councillor McKay?
My impression is that there is a lot of parking on the sides of those streets down there, or there has been when I'm down in that area.
Mhm.
So what are we doing and where are they going? Because they clearly feel like they need to park somewhere. So is there a notice going? Are we telling them to go somewhere else?
Generally speaking, the changes to the parking will be communicated to people who are currently using the streets by way of notices first, and then we're going to be giving out warnings. I believe we discussed a 60-day grace period, and then after that it will be tickets. I haven't evaluated any alternatives for this section here for where people could be parking instead. I just looking at this from a lens of safety.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. I'm just wondering, because I feel like people are gonna do it anyway if we don't have an alternative, because I mean, on Hillside, you could park on one. It's
Yeah,
on two sides, now you can park on one, and now basically there is none on both sides or down the other, so that I.
this,
We might have compliance
Well,
issues
that-
regardless, but
That's the Victoria's Inn on the
Yes.
corner, and I know, and I don't know what its status is right now, but I know at one time, Rotary had its breakfast meeting there, and the place, there was often not enough room in the parking lot, so parked on the street. Now, in that case, it was early morning, but I think sometimes if the street is used for overflow from the Victoria's Inn. So
Mhm.
again, I don't know the status of that inn now, but
I don't know, but.
and Gingerbread House, right? So there's
Yeah.
2 inns in that vicinity that may have attracted some parking.
that section of Roby Tufts being such a short length, I really don't think it's gonna cause any extremely negative effects for people who are using it. They might just have to go a little bit further to get to where they're going.
Except if somebody is using the Victoria's Inn for a meeting, that
Mhm.
I don't know where they would go, particularly if they're from out of town. Anyways, I just share that may be one of the groups that has relied on that. Councillor Elliott?
Just wanted to point out that there's a L'Arche home on Roby Tufts. And if there's no parking on either
Right.
side, that in terms of accessibility, dropping people off, whatever, that could be an issue. So just wanted to notice that.
That's true. And we have had letters from one of the large workers who doesn't live in the house, but is coming to assist. And they, I guess, I don't know what, it might have been a winter parking situation, but that's exactly what happened. Is there more than one large house?
Well, there's one around the
Yeah.
corner too, but there's parking on one side.
Yeah. Anyways, those are some businesses and institutions that you might want to check out.
Mhm.
Okay.
Next up, we have Willow Ave. We're just looking at the short section between Winter and Gaspereau. That section of Willow Ave is not wide enough for parking on either side of the street at any time. It's a very, I'm sure everybody knows how narrow of a section that is. It's currently 2-way. And if there was a vehicle parked there, it would not work. So nobody parks there, to my knowledge. Nobody parks on the side of that street because it would be very dangerous. We're just adding the signage to reinforce that. And there's recently been an issue developing with the area at the bottom of the cemetery, where next to the cemetery entrance, cars have just started parking there, and it turned from 1 car into 2, into 5, into more, and people are just parking on the grass, all very chaotically and at random. So we are posting these signs on there because at present I don't think there's any signage there at all that indicates restricted parking. So if compliance were to give people tickets, they could fight that and potentially win. So we are posting this signage, and we have the authority to ticket and tow vehicles from this area. I will also note that Public Works will be removing the gravel that's down there, and we'll be restoring that to topsoil and sod. So that will likely occur now in the 2023 summer season. So that's that section there.
Councillor Butler?
Yes, I have a question about this little section here. I was excited for this report because I get asked a lot about parking issues as a walker, of course.
Mhm.
I was surprised that Winter Street was not on the, I'm assuming once this is implemented, this is going to be not seasonal, it's all year. Winter, I find in the summer, is an absolute nightmare because people park on both sides of the street. Some actually park in the street. There's a gigantic parking lot there by, I never remember the name of the building. That's not allowed to be used, if I remember correctly. It has to be just for their events.
Mhm.
But I don't know what the signage is on Winter, but when on the Magic Winery bus, we can get halfway down the street and realize there's two cars and we can't get through. And I don't know if you've ever backed up a double-decker bus back out onto Gaspereau. It's not fun.
Okay.
So I don't know what the signage is, but I was surprised that Winter wasn't noted after Willow was, that it was, it's a bit of a nightmare sometimes, because I don't know what kind of signage is there now, but people will park on lawns and right up on the side, and sometimes they are right out in the roads. So I don't know if that was one that could be looked at. Just as an additional, sometimes the summer is when it's a nightmare, but in the winter time as well.
Councillor Ingham?
Yeah, I want to concur with Councillor Butler on that one. And I also want, like, when you live in the East End, that's a thoroughfare for us to go downtown or through Wolfville. Because then you don't have to go on Main Street. It's easier to get, like, going from north to south on the four-way stop. So I drive down there every day. Well, I try to walk, but anyway. But I mean, if I'm going somewhere, but I hardly ever go on Main Street when I go downtown. And so there's always cars parked there, and it's really hard to get around, and it's actually really hard to look around the corner. You have to remember, when you're turning the corner, there's the school there. So there's somebody standing, and then there's people crossing, like, and you don't know if they're going this way or this way, and there's cars everywhere. That's a really dangerous street. So I do concur with that. Can we have a look at that?
Okay. I will add that to my review for next quarter. One thing I also want to, not to get too far off topic here, but I want to address the sight line and visibility issues at this corner.
Yes.
One possible solution I've been considering is dividing the traffic flow between these two streets and making them one way. I know people don't like that word in Wolfville, but one street would become one way and the other street would become one way in the other direction. So that's something I am considering for possible future updates as well. And maybe I'll do that at the same time as evaluating Winter Street. That won't change the no parking signage on Willow Ave at this point. So that is something I'm looking at.
Councillor McKay?
Yeah, that was gonna be exactly my question, because and it always just, it's a trickle effect. We put no parking here, winter's gonna get worse, Gaspereau is gonna get worse, then like everyone is gonna move somewhere.
Mhm.
So we just fix one, move it somewhere else, fix one, move somewhere else. But so my suggestion was, because I know that street as well, when we're, especially from, and the kids walk it a lot too, and they go to the Rotary Parks and everywhere else from there too. So the one ways seem like a really great idea, and maybe we can even do parking on one side of the street and parts of it so that it fixes two problems. But yeah, I look forward to seeing what that might look like.
Yes, having lived around the corner from that for quite a few years, I would agree that parking on Winter is dangerous, hard to get around, hard to see, and that blind spot as you're going towards Willow on Winter is very dangerous. So, agree. I don't know, not in my time. Okay.
Moving on here, Blomidon Terrace, as I mentioned already, is already, this is already no parking on this side of the street, on the east side of the street. The signage to back that up, though, is severely lacking right now, so we're gonna fix that.
I have a question on, or a comment on Blomidon Terrace.
Mhm.
And it may more relate to winter parking. I know in the past, that street is, I don't think an engineer proved it. It's way too steep.
Mhm.
I'm sure people are happy that there's a sidewalk up the west side now, but there are, from time to time, there are people who, after a winter storm, if it's icy, cannot get up the hill with their car. And I believe there was a situation where actually a former councillor parked in down at Willow Park, couldn't get the car up and then got a ticket. I don't know, I guess because you can't park overnight. But anyways, that is an issue and that you might want to take a look at. There will be people who don't have chains on their tires and can't get up that road sometimes. And maybe we need to on nights like that, particularly people who live on Blomidon Terrace have some kind of leeway. I don't know how we do that, but I know it is an issue and it's an unbelievably steep street.
It's 18% grade.
Is that more than it should be?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's very steep. I think in previous years, now I say that I've only been here for one previous winter, but we were giving special exemptions to certain people, allowing them to park on Willow Ave through the winter because they couldn't get up the hill.
Yeah. Anyways, just wanted to make sure that was on your radar.
Yeah. I can have that discussion with compliance, and we can maybe figure out a way to implement special exemption requests for
And just
that
for people
reason.
who need to get up to get home.
Right.
You're walking it.
Now we come to town hall. As many of you know, town hall, the signage behind town hall is quite old and missing in a lot of places. So what we're looking at doing, I'll just skip down to the map here. So what we're looking at doing is repainting some of the parking stalls in the upper section where staff park. We're looking at repainting those with angled spots instead of having them go straight in, because that lot's not wide enough for people to park straight in. It's very, very difficult to maneuver. So we're gonna turn those to angled parking and improve access. It is gonna require people backing up. So some care will have to be exercised by people who are using that upper lot. But there shouldn't be a time after we convert it to angled spots, there shouldn't be a time where someone can't get in or out up there. So that's the big change here. Another thing we're going to be painting out is the last two spots at the end of the emergency services parking here near the generator. People park there anyway, so we're going to paint those two spots out and hatch the area at the very end, so people don't park in a dangerous way and cause access issues. The next, I guess the next biggest change is our compliance, our new compliance EV is coming soon. And we need a place on the building to install a charger, so we have access to electrical infrastructure within the building. And the spot selected for that is the very first area here next to the hose drying tower for the fire department. Currently, it's not actually a spot. It's not painted out as a spot. It's just a bare section where, again, people park anyway. So that space will be designated for the compliance vehicle, and the charger will be installed on that wall. And then we have new signage coming. The signage for the staff parking at the top will be refreshed. This is a sample of what the signs will look like. At the top, we have town staff only, and we're going to be implementing a permit system as well for people to have a little very discreet little sticker to stick on the bottom corner of their windshield. That, of course, will be offered to staff and members of council as well. So people will be able to utilize that lot at the top and anywhere in the back parking lot that says town staff only. The remaining spots, there's 4 public parking spots in the back lot that currently have no signage. We are posting the 3-hour limited parking
this entire site has 3-hour max public parking. Currently without signage in the back, people can park there all day and nobody can enforce the 3-hour limit. So we are putting up the signage to let people know that that's what our lot is. And there is one spot at the very back here on this back wall that we're gonna change to a 20-minute loading and unloading zone for anyone who has heavy things they have to carry into town hall. They should have a place to be able to do that won't be in the way of anyone else. Those are the big changes for the town hall lot.
I have a question, Alex, and it relates to council, so I'm going to have a question for council.
Mhm.
First of all, there's no way, all the people in this room who are staff plus the 2 staffs that I know are in the front office will consume all of the staff parking. So a day like this, there's no space for council. So what I was going to suggest, I wanted to ask how many members of council this morning have a car here? And I'm wondering, there may be other solutions, but I was thinking rather than the 4 spots that are public parking and only 3 hours on days of committee of the whole, which is, I think, when it's going to be the most problematic, when all staff are here and all of council are here, that those, put a pylon there and those become parking for council because, and I was thinking of particularly councillors who live farther away are bringing their car, or councillors who, Councillor McKay, you may be going back to work, so you don't want to, it's not convenient for you to get out of here at noon and walk wherever for your car. So is that something that staff could look at? And it is, I believe, mostly for, certainly for councillors with a car, councillors who don't walk here, and on committee of the whole, when I know all of our staff are going to be taking that to parking lot up. So I'm not suggesting that we answer. First of all, I'd like council's thought on that. But I'm not asking you to answer that today, but wonder if you'd take it under consideration, because I know it is not unusual for us to be waiting for a councillor who couldn't find parking here and had to go somewhere else and then walk over. Council thoughts? Councillor Elliott.
I'm going to chime in because I'm one
You're
of the
the one.
ones who got a ticket for parking out here over 3 hours while I was at a meeting. So it's an issue for me, for sure. I parked on the street today, having talked to Caden about it. It wasn't me that. No, it wasn't. No. But it has been an issue, and I apologize to Mike for the upset that I got when I got the ticket. But it would be wonderful if something could be done.
How many members of council would be in that situation? Councilor McKay, I assume
Yeah,
you?
I leave from here and go straight to my day job, night job, whatever we want to call it, in Kentville. So it's not really convenient for me to walk home, and then it's another hour that I would miss at the office.
That's 2.
I
Councillor
sometimes will drive and
Yeah.
sometimes walk, but I'm wondering if we can just have like a pass to say, in
Well,
the
I'm
car.
thinking because L'Arche now, it might be a little different when it's only 3 hours out there. But because we would sometimes go all day, but what I was thinking, sure, have pass for council, but on days of committee of the whole in particular, that those spots be kept for council. So there's 4 spots there. Looks like we could have 4 councillors. I will get a staff parking ticket, so.
Yeah, if I could just comment on the enforcement of the parking rules, what you suggested at the very beginning, a pylon, for example, putting out pylons very early in the morning would be much easier to implement than trying to figure out who's who parked in those spots. And,
Yeah.
and
Well, I'm just saying pylons that, even a sign that says these are for council, and then, I don't know, I guess Wendy, when you drive up, you'd have to take the pylon out, but I am concerned that members of council need to be here for 8:30. Some of them have to get away
Mhm.
quickly afterwards, or some of them can't get here early, and so they're parking wherever, and then we're late for council.
The challenge with putting out pylons is if someone gets here before staff and parks in those spots, then we wouldn't be able to do that, obviously.
Well, we leave it to you to figure that out. That's the issue.
Mm.
I would like on days of committee of the whole or special committee of the whole, members of council to be able to get here for 8:30 so that we can start on time, whatever that means.
Okay. The police only, the faded police only signs are on the wall here that you can't even read, are also being replaced with this new no public entry sign. And that's it for the town hall lot. At the request of the fire department, we're also replacing the emergency services sign with the little red tow truck symbol. Todd wrote to me and requested signs be made in the town with the town branding format for him, because they're posted all over the side of the building. So we're going to do that as well. That's it for town hall. Last one on the list here is the library. I am designating that section along the curb, along the sidewalk in front of the library as a fire lane. On busy mornings, on market mornings, people parallel park all along there, and they block access for people trying to access the actual parking lot in and out, and would be quite a challenging situation if there was a need for emergency vehicles to be in there, and especially with a building the age of the library building. If there's a fire there, we want fire trucks to be able to get there and park as close as possible, as quickly as possible. So I am designating that as a fire lane, and the signage and painting on the ground will follow. So people will no longer be able to park there. I kind of skipped over this part, but there's the events lawn at the East End Gateway. It was brought to our attention that sometimes people in frustration of not being able to find a parking stall elsewhere will park on the grass. We are posting these signs at strategic locations at the entrances to the events lawn as well. So compliance has the ability to ticket and tow vehicles that park in there. Because without signage, there's no way for them to do that. So that's all I have in this report. Happy to answer any questions.
Is that okay?
Not specifically on that, but on parking. Do we have, I know in the summertime, we piloted some overnight parking in some places. Or in the winter time with the parking, is there any overnight parking allowed?
The pilot is at the East End Gateway lot for this winter. We're trying that out to see if it works, see what the challenges are, and we'll make any adjustments as needed if any are required.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions of staff? Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you,
just
Alex.
one.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Ingham.
Just in response to like, how do counselors, when we come to these meetings, how do we park? I always park on the street, right? So it says 3 hours. So no, and I haven't had any problem at 8:30 to do that. So, but if you know, if for some reason my tire gets marked and I'm here for 4 hours or something, I just suggest it's easy to just have counselor in session or something like that. And so when you walk around, you see, if you don't know my car, okay, this is a counselor, it's in session, she can park here longer than the allotted time. Does that make sense?
So the counselors will be issued a Wolfville staff windshield badge. So that may serve to have the same purpose.
Would that serve the purpose, Caden, in an area? Okay, so that to me is acceptable for my part. I can't speak for everybody else, but if it's 4 cars, I don't ever park behind here, and I seem to park on the street. So I'll be, we want to add it.
Yeah, for sure. So that's definitely something Sean and I can look out for, and I'll make him aware of as well as that rolls out. One thing to note quickly, and Aaron and I may talk to Mitch about it, but the RCMP might not be as aware of it. So that's something we can talk with them about, just to give them the heads up so that you don't come back to a ticket, even though you have the badge there. Yeah.
One follow-up comment I have is once the new signage is implemented in the back, I expect there to be more parking availability for staff and council, especially in the staff only spots, which right now are just inhabited by anyone and everyone. There's the signage up there is really bad or non-existent altogether. So people who want to park will park and there's nothing we can do about it. With the new signage, I expect that to end. I expect there to be more parking availability in the town hall parking lot for people with business at town hall. That is the entire intent behind this revision of our back lot here.
Maybe this is a sacred cow, but there's often, so there's RCMP parking here, often not full. There's an RCMP parking spot out front. There's often an RCMP car in a public lot. Can we not, I mean, I don't understand, frankly, why we have empty RCMP spots here, why we have an RCMP car in a public parking spot, why the RCMP car is idling. You know, I'm sure all of you get, it's always idling. It idles 100% of the time. I don't understand. I get complaints about not enforcing our idling bylaw, and the worst offender is the RCMP. But mostly I wonder if you're going to take a spot up in the public parking up front, then surely you don't need all these spots, which are there's often empty spots here.
I'm not sure how the parking spots, how the parking space was allotted for the RCMP, but it's something we can look at and have discussions with them.
There's a fairness, you know, given, and for me, the worst time is today, when we've got all of our staff here and all of our members of council here. We really need to make accommodation for people who have to be here somehow. Okay, and we are down one counselor, so we could have somebody else in the next committee of the whole who is also driving. So, all right, thank you. Great report. Now we are at equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I don't know who's doing that one.
Kelton?
Kelton?
Yep. So this is in follow-up to the direction that was given to staff at the discussion that council had on Diversity Kings when that motion didn't move forward, but there was some discussion on how we might celebrate some key events between now and the end of the fiscal year and what the path forward may look like. So Kelton's put together a report for discussion. So I'll turn it over to him.
Hi, good morning. I think it's pretty straightforward, and the introduction from our CAO is on point. This is a follow-up to a decision by council not to move forward with the IMSA from Diversity Kings, and a request to see how we might support certainly African Heritage Month and the International Women's Day within this fiscal year, along with an interest focused on how we may choose to facilitate a working relationship with Acadia based on the equity, diversity, and inclusion lens. So the motions in front of you provide funding for those two events. And there's also a motion in front of you to allow us to plan and put on a workshop to see what possibilities exist to work together with Acadia on this portfolio. So that's I did as I was told, and that's what's in front of you, and happy to answer any questions to move this forward and go from there.
Yeah, so a budget's been provided for the events and certainly looking forward to the discussion because this obviously can be scaled up or down depending on where council would like us to go. You'll see in the events budget, there's a one-time banner cost that would be part of the celebrations for African Heritage Month. And then we've contemplated some additional staff support and then some programming around the two events. So interested in getting some feedback on that, some comments around, whatever we do and does set a precedent for future years. So that is a consideration. One of the things Kelton will be doing as part of this year's ops planning process is putting together a calendar of events of all the events that we celebrate throughout the year so that we can have a discussion around the service level expectations and make sure that the budget for our events aligns with the expectations of council, because there's quite a few events now that we didn't, in previous years celebrate. And sometimes we celebrate them in one year because we've partnered and then the next year, maybe we don't. So we want to get a bit of consistency around the expectations. So I just say that as an aside, but certainly in my CAO comments, I note that council can give direction up or down or to not move forward at all. But this is a good starting point and looking forward to the discussion.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think this all came out of what, not joining and then us trying to find a path forward to leave, to not celebrate or bring awareness to the dates that or the things that were important to us in this conversation. So my first thoughts are, I think there's two events on here, so I feel like we're missing clearly a lot more. I would like to see truth and reconciliation on there in some way, shape or form. And I know we lifted our flag for gay pride, so maybe something in there too. So there was two that sort of missed for me. I'm sure there's hundreds of others, but right off the top, I was thinking of those two. I'm not in favor of the street banners. I think that is, I know we use the word celebrate these days in events, but I'm not sure that's the most meaningful way to do something with just a street banner on the side. I think we could do something better spent with that $4,000. But I am in favor of a workshop. I think we need to explore the options, whatever that looks like. I know we'll talk about town and gown and an MOU later too, but I think for the first year, this gives an exploration or time to sit down and have a chat. I think that's worthwhile. I'm not sure what a $3,000 budget, why we're putting $3,000 to a conversation, but I'm happy to hear what that means. And if I'm not sure if council was to be at that, but I think it would be important that we were, especially as we're looking forward to the MOU.
Sorry, did you want to respond?
Yeah, just on why those two events specifically, because those are the two that are left for this fiscal year. So it was just to bridge us to March 31st. And clearly, yes, I definitely agree that there's more events that need to be covered. I just wanted to clarify. That's why.
Councillor Ingham.
Thank you. I just want to commend staff on the presentation and the work that went into this, because after the IMSA agreement with Kings did not pass, you got right to work on it. And so I do really appreciate that, knowing that it does really matter to council. So I have a couple of issues. That being said, I could be diversion and inclusion are tangible or are not tangible, and we have to commit to understand, right? So, I mean, I looked at those two events and I'm like, those are two. Aaron, you just explained why, they were two. It goes is up till March. I get that. I can start listing off a whole bunch of them, right? And so I think the involvement with Acadia is really going to be important. So the $15,000 that we're spending on this, what do we do after that? Where are we committed after that? Because this is work that we need to do. I look at, and I'm checking my notes because in October, we have, Learning Disability Awareness Month. We have International Day for older people. What matters to our community? So to response to Aaron, like some of the things we did one year, we didn't put on to a next. So do we need to go out and know our community to say what matters? Maybe in this part of this certain community, we think this is a day that they celebrate, but it's not really important to them. So what goes on the diversity calendar is very, very important. And so you not being a diversity specialist and trying to pick those, how are we going to pick those and how are they going to be meaningful to our, our community? So I really think we need to, with the new EDI RA that they're forming, I think it's Dr. Boner that was just hired as what is she called? The vice provost for EDI at Acadia. How can we work with them to have somebody, like, I would rather have the money meaningful to have somebody that's an EDI specialist saying what's for Wolfville, instead of just throwing $4,000 out to, Black Heritage Month, which is the County of Kings is already going to have a big campaign on that too. So I feel like sometimes we're piecemealing this, and I do appreciate everything that you're doing. Don't get me wrong. I totally really appreciate it. But I think we're just falling short on this. And I'm wondering how we can start to work with Acadia to have directives that are together and then, exclusive to our community. We have an older population, right? And so it needs to be meaningful, and we need to go out into those communities and find out what's important to, Black Nova Scotians in our area of Gibson Woods, right? To be it meaningful. So I applaud all the work that you're doing. I'm just thinking, how can we pair better with Acadia, and how can the council be involved with having some input on that to have somebody? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Councillor Butler.
Did you have something to say, Erin? Because your light was on.
Oh, I just want to say, so when the Diversity Kings proposal came, there was part of the presentation that said what would happen between now and the end of the fiscal year. And so those two events were highlighted. And so that was part of the specific direction, which is why those two events are there. Agree 100% that's piecemeal. And I think where the challenge is that part of the work that the county would have done had we moved forward with that proposal is done some of those conversations with the community around what's important in Wolfville. And so this workshop with Acadia that's proposed may in fact do that, because the direction from council was, let's look within our community and see what we can do differently if we don't go forward with Kings. So that could help. And to an earlier question, we definitely have council involvement at that workshop. It would not be intended to be staff only, it would be council as well. But part of the piecemeal is that we didn't move forward with that proposal, and it was like, okay, what can we still do in the interim so we don't lose momentum and let it fall off as a priority?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And I really do appreciate that. I'm wondering if there's any way, and I know this maybe could be put in the MOU with Acadia, that we have a joint EDI committee, between Acadia and the town of Wolfville. And how can we use our resources for money to have an expert in that area with Acadia? And then still we're partnering with the County of Kings. I mean, we live in Kings County, so all these areas are, I just don't attend things that are in Wolfville, and people come from outside to go to Wolfville. So it's a community, right? So I don't want it, and nobody wants to exclude. So I think that partnership is still important, but how can we merge to have like a joint committee or something that we have that specialist at the helm, right?
Councillor Butler.
I have a couple of questions, and I'll let Director Thomason answer them just as I'm doing them. This was a great report. I knew that it would generate a fair bit of discussion, so I was kind of excited about it. With the two motions, the dollars associated with African Heritage Month and International Women's Day, this is just town run. It's not Acadia partnered, correct?
This is coming out of the town. I've had initial conversations with Acadia on how this can be done together.
Okay, because they do already have events
That's correct.
that we've never actually been invited to participate in.
Correct.
Okay. They're very important events. I feel that 15,000 is a lot to put into them. Just in terms of if we are setting a precedence and think about the number of events that are coming, that is an awful lot of money to do that. I think that there definitely needs to be acknowledgement. I've never been a fan of the street banners either, so I'm glad that Councillor McKay, I always think of them at the Remembrance Day time, and when you drive through towns and you see them, they're wonderful, but I find them distracting as if they were off sort of not the beaten path, but if there was some way to do something like that, not where it's going to be a distraction driving down main streets and the safety issue, then that's okay. I had a question about the student position that is listed as part of the 15,000. Is that student position for the 6 weeks just to plan those two specific events, or is there going to be more contribution to planning events as a whole, if that's.
The
path
majority
we
of that time was allocated for these two events in
Okay.
preparation for a couple of things that I just want to ensure that folks recognize within this report, that the banners, the early discussions around the banners, these were not intended to be clinical town developed banners. This was a community engagement opportunity for folks within our community to develop the artistic look to the banners and have those populated. So that in case folks had missed that within this discussion, those banners were going to be developed by community members in
Okay.
support of African Heritage Month.
Okay.
And also for reference, in terms of the dollars, this would be similar dollars that we would currently spend on events like Canada Day and Heritage Day in February. So
Okay.
that the request with the banners aside would be similar to the budget that would be put forth for those two other events as a
Okay.
point of reference.
Okay. The next thing that came up was the actual, I knew that there was an EDI committee at Acadia. It's more campus based, correct? They don't,
Currently,
okay. It's quite populated with a very diverse group, but there's no town representative on that, which kind of, it surprised me when I was looking at their committee, how populated it is with no town representative. So I wasn't sure if that was something that could be opened up for discussion in terms of having a town representative on their EDI committee. I don't know what they actually do on campus.
I defer that to our CAO right now.
Okay.
So we met with the vice provost of equity and inclusion. I probably got her title wrong, Claudine, yesterday.
Mhm.
And that very discussion came up
Okay.
where that committee does have good representation from campus, a variety of different groups, no town representative. And it was something that she felt could benefit from having a town representative. So one of the takeaways was I was going to speak to the mayor, which I haven't yet, 'cause this was yesterday at 3:30, about at the next discussion with Dr. Ricketts to make that request that we actually have a town representative, sit on that committee.
Okay.
So I think it's an excellent idea and it
Okay.
would help bridge that gap.
Yeah, because it was an exciting, like to read about the committee. I was like, wow, it's got exactly what you'd want in an EDI committee. My last question is just more for clarification. I am all for a workshop where Acadia and council or whomever wants to participate in it. I loved our day that we had with Brad Shepherd. I thought that was fantastic. I could do that every month. So I'm all for that. I'm still a little on the fence about the African Heritage International Women's Day portion of this. My question was about the red and blue crew. I found that I'm still having trouble getting clarity on the EDI portion of the red and blue crew. I feel after reading this, it just feels like there's a bunch of groups that want to do the same thing, but it's not together. Like there's a portion of the red and blue crew that is EDI based, but then there's the EDI committee that wasn't factored into the red and blue crew. And now there's the town wants to do something that's EDI related, but not connected to Acadia. I just feel like it's not, we all want the same thing, but it's not, the ducks are not in a row kind of a thing. I don't know if you can clarify sort of the red and blue crew portion.
No,
of
I
it.
think the ducks are swimming in muddy water right now. My takeaway from the last discussion from council was there's an opportunity to work with Acadia on this file. And that was important, as I understood from council, that we start to look at that and what that may look like. And that's fundamentally why this notion of a facilitator workshop was the starting point to figure this all out. The red and blue crew has a line in there for EDI micro grants for students to access simple funding to do some promotion and work on campus through EDI. That was also a fairly significant portion of the ask that the Alumni Association is interested in. That's well on their priority list. So that's how that fits. We are trying to figure out how this all works together, and it will take some efforts. And I appreciate your understanding, but it will start with trying to figure out what's possible before what we actually do.
Councillor Elliott?
Well, I think I have to acknowledge that this is all a process and we're working our way towards doing things better. I was really encouraged recently when Polly Leonard at Acadia reached out to me for the Women of Wolfville around the event that's happening this afternoon. And she wanted to be as inclusive of the community as possible. So there are initiatives happening, and if we can help with that process, then that's good. I think this is just for the next little while, this sum of money, as Aaron said. But we also, I think, should be mindful that there are other initiatives happening. I'm thinking, Mike, of the Memory Cafe, which, our staff were and are significantly involved with in terms of the older population in town. That's a wonderful initiative. And there are lots of things going on for the old, for the young, and for the inclusiveness. And so I think we just have to try and find our way. It's not a clear path, but we have some direction for the interim. So that's my perspective.
Councillor McKay?
Thank you. I concur with Councilor Elliott. I just saw this as, this was the last thing we said when we said we weren't going to be part of the EDI with the County of Kings was, let's just not sit down and do nothing.
Yep.
So this is quite literally a stopgap in my viewpoint of, and now that I understand it's just for 20 till the end of this fiscal, those two events make sense. I think the hours that got put in can also be to develop those and then tell us what other things are happening in those times. And maybe we're not doing full-blown celebrations, but we could certainly acknowledge and learn and do social media posts and communications or whatever that person decides that we need to do. So that makes sense to me. I think it's just the stopgap, and the bigger conversations about how we integrate with Acadia and their EDI and whatever that looks like are really, really important. Sitting on the committee is certainly one. Again, that would be written in the MOU, in my opinion. So as people change, the position doesn't get lost. But again, that's a process that we'll have to work ourselves through. So I'm okay with that. And even, and I do like the idea of a community engaged art project for street banners. I would hate to see them done and then not used if this isn't a long-term thing. So I think that would be almost insulting to not use them going forward. So unless it's something we plan on using year after year after year, we just wouldn't do it. But having some sort of community engagement on both of those events, I think till the end of this year would be nice. And let's see where the process takes us. Acknowledging the fact that we aren't going to cover everything. We're going to do our best, and we are still learning, and we're committed to doing better in the coming years.
Councillor Ingham?
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm fine with this as like a bridge to get started, because we need to start, obviously somewhere. I really feel that the workshop with Acadia needs to be done sooner rather than later. So when I look at this whole thing, what I look at is the workshop with Acadia is really important, and the co-op students really important, because that's the co-op students or the student we hired, that's their focus, right? And so that matters. You have other jobs, and it's hard to, to do everything. So the student's important, and the workshop is very, very important. So the sooner we can start that, so we know as a council or and a town where we're headed in the direction, not just like the next time there's an event, here's another $5,000 to do it. I don't want to be like that. So the workshop is important, but I'm okay with all this to bridge the gap. So.
Deputy Mayor.
I concur with the comments my colleagues have made so far. I guess one of the things I would like to see in addition is to identify other groups within our community who should be involved in these various events. Thinking of the memory one that, not a lot of people know about that. And maybe that could be something that the student does, that it's not just looking at what the town does with Acadia, but explore what other groups or associations within our town need to be involved, so that they're also more included in what Acadia does, but more included in what we do. And I think just having that broader perspective of who else we need to engage in this process and not just look at the two entities.
All right. I have great concerns about this. I will, when the vote comes, if it's the majority of council would like to do that, I will support that, but I don't really support this. I also, listening to the conversations and some of the comments of the CAO, I think there is a problem when, you know, the term has been used, this was council direction. I don't think it was a wealth, and this is not a reflection on council, but we were responding to not approving connecting with Diversity Kings. And so there was a brief brief discussion. There wasn't this kind of fulsome discussion. I think if council was actually going to give direction, we would probably continue this discussion for another hour with some options, and then we could give council staff direction. So, and that this is not the only time this has happened. I have a real concern that staff take a quick discussion of council as staff direction, and maybe that's something that we can have a discussion on in the future. I didn't realize this was just to fill in the end of the budget year, so I guess I'm a little bit more okay with that than I was. I think there are many communities. We have a diverse community. To spend 15 of 18,000 on a single group is concerning to me. We have a growing Muslim group in the community. We have we certainly have a Ukrainian refugees coming into the community. I bet if we sat and brainstormed and with the help of groups like the Acadia group and even our staff who run the Memory Cafe, we could really talk about who is in our community and who doesn't feel included or who we could include more. I attended a Maui Omi that was run by Horton students, and 2 years ago, I think they held it at Clock Park. They're just equity and inclusion and diversity is more than a program, a celebration of one group. So that's what concerns me. The amount of money concerns me. I'm not sure. One always sits in this particular seat and is careful about the words one chooses, particularly on this particular day. But we have a council that is a majority women. We have a female mayor. We have a female CAO. I don't think that we can say women are not included in our community. So why have they been chosen as one of the two? And I think that is because there was a bit of a quick reaction of council at the last meeting and staff took that as direction. I think we need to be cognizant that council does need to have fulsome discussion before we give actual staff direction. So I personally would like to see going forward a more well thought out and council included in that thinking out is what are our needs. I recall the equity and diversity report from King's talked about looking at our hiring policy. And I thought, surely if staff have not already looked at our hiring and our staff policies, and if there are any things in those policies that we need to be more inclusive about, well, let's get at it. I don't feel that that's the case actually, but I'm not looking at those policies. So I personally feel this is a lot of money done quickly without a fulsome discussion, and that concerns me. But as I said at the beginning, if it is the wish of council to do this, then I also support it because I am not against these initiatives. What I was looking for was something that was more of a community discussion. I really like the comments that Councillor Ingham made about let's talk to our community, let's spend money on talking to our community, let's spend, maybe we need to put $20,000 or $24,000 into something like our community partnership policy and, let the museum come forward and ask for some money to celebrate International Women's Day. Let us put more money into celebrations for gay pride. Let us hear from our growing Muslim community. What do they want to celebrate? But it's also not about celebration only. It's about, is there anything we're doing that makes you feel uncomfortable to come into to our council chamber? There are so many things, as Councillor Ingham has said. I want to learn about those. It's not just a community celebration to me, but I will be guided by the will of this council on this motion. Councillor Ingham.
Yeah, and so those are all really, really good points, because I think when I brought out all the other days, and in June, that there's a day in June for World Refugee Day. So
Yeah.
when Aaron was talking about the $15,000 was what we would have given to the County of Kings if we had proceeded with the IMSA. And so these are the two days that we chose, right? Do I like the fact that do we know, like, do we go out to the community and say what's valuable, what's not valuable, what do we want to see? We didn't. But we just need a starting point. And what I said to Kelton about, let's really get together with Acadia and try to hammer out something, because we do need some guidance. We can't just, piecemeal things. So because it's a start, and it's not perfect. It's not perfect, but it is a start. Those are days that are going to be celebrated. The other ones are coming along at the end of the year. So October is Mi'kmaq History Month. And what else do we have here? World Mental Health Day. Those are all really big ones. They're in October. So this is getting us till March, right? So this is a start. It's not perfect, but I just feel like we need to start somewhere, and maybe this is our start.
CEO.
Yeah, just back to a comment that the mayor made that I've made before at Committee of the Whole, and I think it's a fair point that sometimes it's difficult in the heat of the moment to give direction, and Committee of the Whole is where issues should live and discussion should happen before direction's provided. And I just went back to the minutes, because the direction at the time that was provided, for good or for bad, was for the CAO to come back with a report and project charter for review and a plan for how International Women's Day and African Heritage Month can be celebrated. So that's what we did. And I take the point that, yeah, in the moment it's difficult because there wasn't that discussion that's now happening here. So I just want to reinforce, you don't ever have to move forward with any decision in the moment. Like, you always can take that time to go, let's put this back on the agenda for December, because I think that's happened before on other issues. And I know you mentioned maybe talk about it later, but that is why we took that specific direction and why you're seeing such a specific report come back from us. But, this discussion's been great, and I think it will inform the
Maybe
broader.
Going forward, because you can sit a little bit outside of us when you see those motions, maybe to help remind us, is this really what you want? Or do you want to, do we want to move this to a longer discussion? Because it's in the heat of the moment, and some things, and this is one of those things where there is some personal emotion attached to it. You want to do something, you don't want to just say, no, this is not important. And it is hard to take a sober step backwards in those moments, feels to me. Councillor Butler.
Just a couple of comments. So the fact that we're having this discussion on this particular day is kind of one of those things. So I look at the event today that I just kind of heard about over the last 2 days. The day is coming, but so today's event at Clock Park is Acadia run within the town, and the town is involved. Is there a cost to today's event? There is not, but yet there is acknowledgement of today. So things can be done without a cost or a dollar put on them. Is there a way to, that was just one point. But the fact that we have talked about all of these different events and things that happen in a calendar year, that we are talking about the celebration of this and the celebration of that, but there is the awareness, education. Not all of these events are a celebration of something. So I think maybe that is why the motion itself was kind of conflicting with me, because even during Pride Month, you are celebrating a certain thing, but you are also acknowledging that it is a disastrous history that led to these things. Is it possible to take out the word celebrate and just put acknowledge? that we are delivering events to acknowledge African Heritage Month and International Women's Day. I feel better putting dollars towards events where we are acknowledging and celebrating and also bringing awareness and educating, but it is acknowledging those particular events. We can't ignore them. It's going to happen. Whether we have an event today that has no cost to it, but yet it is an acknowledgement, it is a remembrance. So I don't know if that helps a bit of the discussion to kind of switch the wording out. But that was just what was going through my head at the time.
Thank you, Councillor McKay.
Yeah, I agree. That's why I didn't like some of the wording of it. It's just, I mean, it's just semantics maybe, but I think that the council approved the $3,000 budget to work with Acadia, or I'm assuming that's a facilitated discussion. So I think that is important. I think that is the first step in just opening lines of communication and discussion and get things moving in a direction that we would feel comfortable. Can we, because I really don't want to do nothing. I think if we just leave it, we're going to come back here during the budget process again and go, wow, I really don't know. Let's just put more money into it and do it again. So without taking the list of things that are there, so student positions, street banners, and celebrating or acknowledging those things, can we have someone, and I'm not sure if it's appropriate to have it off the corner of someone's desk, but we have a student position. Is it possible to say, we'll take the $10,000 to $15,000 and say, start the discussions on what a calendar would look like, go out into our community, work with Acadia, start populating some information to inform that, the calendar and the workshop, so that when we come back next year in February with a budget, we have some idea of what maybe we'd like to do. Our MOU might be a little bit further along. We have some information to help us guide a better decision. It's not piecemeal, it's not, but will it be fulsome? Maybe not in that amount of time, but at least it gives us something to make a basis on. And if that, whoever the student position is, figures out how we can work together on Black History, International Women's Day, or any of the other things, or today's event, and how we bring those things together in the interim, I would be interested in doing that. It gives us a point where we're doing something, we're moving forward, we're trying to educate ourselves to do better, and we can allocate more dollars in a more fulsome way come next budget year.
So that would be a change to the wording of this motion.
Correct.
Right, and since we don't have a motion on the floor,
I could change it. If
I
that was the
I
will
was
of
going to
council.
ask, would we have to
Yes.
vote on the one that's there, or could we have a different motion?
No, you could have a different motion. So there are two motions now as contemplated. So the second motion deals with the workshop. So I think that's, seems to have some support from what I'm hearing in the discussion. The first motion, that's very specific wording. You may want to just throw a different motion on the table that gives an upper limit amount of expenditure that captures.
So I kind of straw vote. Is that is council generally in favor of the second motion, and would like to see a change in the wording of the first motion, or do we want to see the first motion? What's kind of, can I just see well, I was just wondering, are we generally in, we're not voting here. I just want to get a sense.
I'm not in favor of the second motion.
Okay, so, all right,
I'm the same one.
yeah, but we're okay with putting the second motion on the floor.
Yes.
But the first motion, don't necessarily need to support it, but we are okay. Generally, I see people are okay putting it on the floor. Just a minute, please. And the first motion, we generally feel that if Councillor McKay comes up with some wording, we would rather have that than the first motion. I'm seeing a shaking of heads on this side. Obviously, Councillor McKay, I'm supportive of that. Councillor Ingham? Or would you like to see the first motion read?
Computer's not working. I'm just trying to read a few things. Would you be able to put up on the screen the breakdown of,
I should have it on that papers that I. gave
No,
you.
no, it's not the
no, it
motion.
says
It's not the
breakdown.
motion. It's
It's
just.
just really small. I can't make it any bigger.
Yeah. No,
Oh.
it's not. It's just the breakdown of whatever before I say, and my computer's not on the, oh, sorry. That's it. Okay. Couldn't hear. Okay.
Just
So
lost
the
it.
motion. So the first, okay.
I think the word celebrate is really important.
Yeah, okay, we can take that out, celebrate out.
Student position, 6 weeks at 15 hours per week, 4,000 for the street banners, 4,000 for Black History Month programming and events, and 4,500 for International Women's Day programming and events, and then a small amount under $1,000 for printing and promotional material for both.
So is it the breakdown that we're having a little bit of the issue with, or like, so you want it, you want
Well,
like,
what I'm trying to, we can put the motion as it is up and see where that goes. And if it is defeated, then Councillor McKay, I understand, is working on some wording for an alternate motion. And I understand just from shaking of heads that not that you would, that the majority of council is okay with putting that on the
okay,
floor.
that's fine.
Deputy Mayor?
I just wanted to speak to the wording. I understand Councillor Butler's comments around acknowledging, and I think the word acknowledge is very important. But I think the word celebrate, particularly with the Black History Month, is also important, because I think that's part of why we have those events, is to celebrate the successes that that particular community has seen. So I wouldn't want to deny that aspect of the event. So maybe acknowledge and celebrate, but I think that the word celebrate for that community in particular is an important word.
If that
so-
motion doesn't go on the floor, it may not be appropriate depending on what the. So what I have just said and make so that I understand, we can put the original first motion on the floor if council wishes, and if it passes as it is. We can take it off. Councillor McKay is writing something else which may or not include celebrate the first one. The second one, a majority of council has shaken their heads and said, put that on the floor. Doesn't mean that you have to vote for it, but
And then, are you rewording the first one?
so are we wanting to vote on the first motion as it is? No. Okay, so the first motion, it looks like, is off the table. So we're going, we could do that.
Let's put the second one on right now.
Okay, would somebody like to move the second motion?
I can do that.
And remember to say that committee of the whole for the following motion.
Okay.
Councillor Butler.
I move that committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision, that council approve a $3,000 budget and direct staff to work with Acadia University to plan and deliver a workshop for council and identified members of the Acadia community who are best positioned to lead and champion a shared model to support equity, diversity, and inclusion work in the town of Wolfville.
Councillor Elliott has seconded. Is there any discussion on that motion? Deputy Mayor.
I just want to say I support half of that motion. I don't support the $3,000 budget. I think that we should be meeting with Acadia to explore this, and everything, the intent of that is very good. But I think the 3,000 is too high. You know, if there is a need to follow up with a more facilitated, I think we're putting money first before we know exactly what it is. So
Presumably that would be to hire somebody to facilitate that workshop. Am I correct?
And where it's a rough estimate, you could say to a maximum of 3,000. I think that unless there's thought it would be more. But if there was a concern of the dollar amount, say to a maximum of, and if it comes in less as a cooperative effort, then it comes in less.
I would like to see it as a cooperative effort, not the
Yeah.
town paying. And this to me suggests that the town is paying for this to try to bring what I think should be happening anyway.
But it may be not an Acadia person. It may be a third party brought in to facilitate that you'd have to pay.
Those are all the details I think that would be worked out once, if this motion was passed, then work would be underway to identify who could do this. And it would not be to pass $3,000, but it could be less depending on the
Would the
cooperative.
mover and the seconder accept to add the terms to a maximum of $3,000?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Any other comments on that motion? All those in favor of the motion with that slight amendment, please indicate by saying aye. Aye, opposed? Okay. Councillor McKay, have you wordsmithed a new motion?
I think so. Let's see. Come up with.
Go ahead.
I would move that committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision that council directs staff to begin the process of planning and delivering events, including hiring staff to find connections to work with and enhance equity, diversity, and inclusion with the County of Kings and Acadia to celebrate, educate, and connect with our community up to spending $15,000 maximum.
Okay, Councillor Ingham, is there any discussion on that? Very good. Director McLean.
Could I ask a question from the staff perspective? Well, with all respect, and the chair
Go.
mentioned it earlier, sometimes we need to step back and what are we
Good
doing
point.
in this moment? I think everybody's trying to get to the right goal. I'm unclear whether there was a lot in that and we're talking this fiscal year. That feels to me, from a staff perspective, very much of what we should be working on in our draft budget heading into 23-24, because to achieve much of what was there will take some time. And I'm just wondering, the first motion gets you started with the consultation and the reach out. From that, we'll start to inform, I think, everything everybody's talked about. And should this funnel more into a more fulsome budget discussion for 23-24?
100% it should funnel
More
into a more fulsome discussion into the budget. What we talked about hiring a student on a part-time basis there. So I think whatever that looks like in terms of, because I don't think it should live off the corner of someone's desk when we're going through budgets. We're like, there's going to be no time for current staff to do all of that work. So whatever it looks like to hire someone as a student position to keep us informed, to keep us piggybacking on to the events that are happening, like the one this afternoon at Clock Park. Keep us engaged in that way. Well, then it'll give us some information. So when we come back to the table, after that, we get the information and we have a facilitated workshop with Acadia. Hopefully in February, we'll have something to make a really good decision with dollar amounts on it as to what our long-term plan is. But this is just to get us until.
So this could be
March
for a
2022.
student hire?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
So that
Yeah.
just, and I'm looking for clarity because I'm trying to figure out where the dollars are coming from, what we're
Sure.
doing. Is the student that was envisioned in this, and I'll stand to be corrected by Kelton, is that position would have started mid-January. So as envisioned, that wouldn't get us anything by February in any great detail. So are we looking to hire somebody right away?
Because
Because
out of this year's budget, I assume.
it's
Is that
this
am I
year's
correct?
budget, but the plan was not to fill that position noted in the report until mid-January. Because we don't have a position that goes past mid-December right now to fill that. So I'm trying to understand the details of the motion as staff can take that back. That position doesn't start to mid-January. These are the details I'm trying to say, well, okay, what did that all just mean to us?
So staff, you as a staff are unsure of the motion, like it's not clear enough for you for.
Well, I
to
think
take it.
I've just heard that may be
Yeah.
hiring a term position to do this work. So that would have to start immediately.
I mean, when I'm gonna go back to the breakdown.
Councillor Ingham?
Sorry, I'm gonna go back to the breakdown because. I mean, I think 1680 per student is really not enough. Maybe we need to hire two. Like, I see where you're going from. But are you concerned that you as staff aren't going to be able to, like, as when Jody read the motion?
The 1680 was for a part-time position, part-time hours starting in January. That's why it's a lower dollar amount. That's what I'm trying to get at. The devil's in the details of this is that position as envisioned in here wasn't immediate. It would start somewhat later, which is later than the information you're hoping to have back in February.
Can I ask a question then? If it's okay.
Absolutely.
Is it possible? I mean, the plan was to hire a student. Is it possible to put out fairly quickly? that ad and have them start the 1st of February, and at least by the budget sessions in February would have some information. And we could start to piggyback on, because the County of Kings and Acadia would have a great, some information
Yeah.
that we could borrow and start to inform some of the things we want to do and piggyback on some of the events that we might do. Is it unreasonable to think we could put out an ad of what that might look like and have them start the 1st of January?
To start the 1st of January.
Ish.
I mean, we could put out an ad and see how quickly we can fill it. And would it be envisioned by council that would be more, like, would you see a shift more in the budget to have that as more of a full-time position that's focused on this, or still that in that part-time realm? I'm just trying to get my head around the scope. So they would work with other partners to do something for African Heritage Month and International Women's Day to be defined. And then they would talk to other stakeholder groups around what might be possible to help populate that calendar and inform council in the ops planning process for next year around how do we, I almost use the word celebrate, how do we acknowledge or celebrate, it might be appropriately, and what events are we doing and to what level, so that that informs council. So those would be the key deliverables. We may scale back and not do, say, the banner program right away, but like, so they would basically do some program delivery on those 2 events and then help Kelton's team through discussions with key community stakeholders, give council a shell of a calendar of what that might look like go forward. That's really the key, trying
Yes.
to.
That's what's in my head.
Yes. And
So that for that, and I'm looking, because we're doing this, so 15 is likely on the high side for what would be required for that, because I'm hearing scale back kind of what we had planned for the events, bring in somebody part-time. And if we still kept with the timeline that we had, that we brought someone in January and that was their role, they could still do those 2 events. And then as we had information to populate the budget, we could bring it back. So I'm just trying, that's the clarity.
not to throw another spanner, but I'm thinking Councillor Ingham has sat on Diversity Kings, and for all I know, you're still gonna, like, we don't know what's happening with that. But I'm thinking, there are Councillor Ingham, Councillor Butler, who have a kind of a sense of some of the diverse communities. Maybe this individual that gets hired, maybe we have a kind of an ad hoc group of, frankly, any members of council who are interested. But I look to you because you've had that experience, just to work, with that person, be the conduit for council, some of council's discussions, because I think some of the problems happen when we, I'm sure if we came back tomorrow and discussed this again, we'd tweak the motion again. But to do the motion, but also to have a little bit closer conduit in this case between council and Kelton and the individual and frankly Acadia. So I'm not suggesting that today, but I'm suggesting maybe we can mull that around a bit, and it seems like this might be one of those things where we want a little closer communication, or more frequent communication between council and the staff position. We could talk about that, not here, but.
Yeah. And another suggestion, just to take the point earlier about taking some time, is understanding council's intent. We could go away and come back with something for council, direct to council, that might be a little bit more shaped. So you could either pass this motion or just choose to defeat it at this point and give the direction to come back in 2 weeks with something that's, okay, here's a different budget and here's how we're going to tackle what you've discussed today. So I just throw that as an alternative as well,
That's a good.
because it won't pass until council anyway. So we can take some time, and then staff can have some discussions, not in real time here, about how we might further that. So just throw that out.
Yeah, so, and sorry, is it okay?
Yeah, sure.
So in response to Mayor Donovan, I'm on, like, obviously on diversity, and when I write my reports and I talk to Councillor Butler on this, he goes, I like the calendar. I like when you put down what's going on in January, where's the calendar? And so if there's any way that we can, like, as if there's a student, if I can be involved, I can pass the calendar on, and I do share that, all my reports share that. And then can it be put on the town website? Because the county of King, we live in the Kings County, right? So I mean, we're in this community, right? So can that initially be shared, and how can we share that more? And then the same with Acadia, can we get their calendar? How can we share that more? And then maybe even have a section in on our wolfville.ca for equity, diversion, and inclusion of events. just a separate calendar, maybe to start off with. But I do agree, like, I do agree with you, like, that when, and as we're talking, like, we don't want to rush this. It should be done right, right? Do you know what I mean? And I know I talked about bridging the gap because I'm excited. I want to get the ball rolling, right? But it needs to be done in the right way. And as I am on the committee, and we had a meeting last night, it's right before committee of the whole. So anything that's majorly updated, I can update you on that right away. And so we can still use their template and make sure that we're using it valuably.
So we have a motion on the floor. I don't know where we are right now. And I saw Jody writing, so I don't know if she's we have a second, we have a motion, a seconder.
I am, after that discussion, I would be okay if we took a pause, so whether we have to defeat that probably at this moment, if that's the wish. And then we, whether it needs to be a motion or a direction for staff to come back. So what I'm a little bit leery of, if we keep pushing it, is we're gonna get to February, and we're gonna have absolutely nothing. So, which is what I think what made our haste last time, was we just keep losing ground and keep losing ground every time we don't move it forward. So if this motion was to be defeated, would it need to be direction or a motion to say direct staff to come back to council with a plan on how staff would implement a calendar, gather information, work with our community partners, gather the information to inform our budget decision? So that's how I see it. So whether that is a motion or direction, I leave to you.
Are you confused now?
No, let's do that as a motion. So if this motion that's on the floor gets defeated, you could put another motion just to capture that directs staff to come back at the December council meeting with a
For
yeah.
discussion. Hopefully it's been
Oh
paid.
my gosh.
All right, let's vote on the first motion. All those in favor of the first motion, and if it passes, we won't go to a new one, but if it doesn't, we have a new one. Please indicate by saying aye. Those opposed? Nay. Okay. Councillor McKay, do you have another motion?
I did. Quick thinking today. Good thing I had coffee.
We'll take a coffee break after this.
I would move that committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision, that council directs staff to come back at the next council meeting with a plan on how staff would work or hire an individual to work with our community and our partners, such as Acadia and the municipality of Kings, to help inform our budget process in February, March for the year 2024, 2023, 2024.
One small, maybe individual or individuals.
Sure.
I'd much rather have two heads or something.
Yes, good point.
Okay.
All right. Councillor Butler will second that. Is there any discussion?
I'll take it from the notes, and we do have this recorded, so we'll get back to it.
I'm taking minutes too, so you can send me those as well. I'll go back and listen.
Okay. All those in favor of this motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed. That is passed. Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you, staff. This is clearly something of strong interest to this council. I would think council also wants to be involved in that process. So we will take a 10-minute coffee break. Come back.
Amanda, we'll just mute the room for now.
We are muted. Welcome back, everybody. And we are on RFD 075 2022 Committees of Council, Councillor Appointments, CAO.
So I will be Laura, since she's tied up with election stuff today. So thank you. And so the request of council was that this get dealt with at today's committee of the whole, and we will be doing a special council meeting after to formalize it. So you have the report in front of you. I'm just going to start off by saying councillors will probably be familiar with the attachment that normally comes with this report that has a list of all of the citizen and councillor appointees for committees. That template has been with us probably for a decade, and we've noticed as we've gone through and we did a cleanup of our committees of council policy earlier this year that it needs to be refreshed. There were some errors on it that just got carried over. So we're not including that today for either this or the citizen appointments. Laura will go away after all the appointments are made and clean up that template for you. But we tried to make it clear in the report around which appointments are for 2 years, which appointments are for 1 year, because that even got lost in some of the appointments where it should have been for 2 years, but we changed them out after a year. So try to clean that up for you and go back to the recently adopted terms of reference, which are a lot clearer now as well. So that's there. So I know that every councillor did sit down with the mayor and express interest in where you'd like to be. So hopefully that has been captured in the recommended appointments that are here. I should note that this doesn't consider the new councillor that will be added to our complement in a number of weeks. And so sometime in the new year, when that person is in place and settled, we'll come back with some recommendations about where they may fit. So for right now, it's just spreading the workload amongst the 6 current councillors. So, and I just want to go through and just clarify a couple key points. So with audit, the mayor and 2 councillors all vote. So the recommendations are there for Mike to be the chair, Wendy as mayor is a voter, and Isabel. This is all for a 2-year term. So this would actually carry forward through the rest of the council term. We wouldn't have to make those changes next year. Accessibility is the mayor and 1 member of council, both vote. So that's Wendy, Dee, and Jen that are being recommended for that. Also a 2-year term, so we would not be coming back next year for that. It would carry through to the end of the council term. Planning is the mayor and 3 members of council, all vote. So recommending Isabel chair, Wendy D, Jen, and Wendy E. These are all 1-year terms, so we would come back next year and have a discussion around who may take that place or whether we keep it the same, but we will revisit that next November. Source water is the mayor and 2 councillors, all vote. I did note when I was going through this that the terms of reference actually leave us with an even number, and that's something that we'll probably want to fix at some point. Doesn't affect it for this year, but I have it noted that next time we come back with housekeeping amendments, we'll definitely look at that in the policy. So the recommendation is Wendy E chairs, and then Mike and Wendy D. This one is silent on the term, but I'm recommending that it actually carry forward for 2 years because Alex is just really getting that going. And I think to change it over in a year, once we start getting some momentum, would be problematic. So even though the terms of reference are silent, would recommend the appointments be for the 2 years. RCMP, the mayor doesn't vote automatically unless is one of the appointed 3, which we're recommending would be. So Mike Butler, Wendy E, and Wendy D. This is also a 1-year term. So we would come back next year and revisit the RCMP appointments. REMAC is a 2-year term, 2 members of council. Mayor doesn't vote if attending, and not one of the 2 members, which the mayor wouldn't be in this case. So Joni and Jen are the 2 that are being recommended for that. And then the town and gown would be for a 2-year term as well. The mayor and 1 other councillor both vote. So the mayor and Jody are the 2 being recommended for that position. So I just wanted to highlight those are our internal committees that we have some control over, or partnership committees that we have some influence on. So those are the terms and those are the recommendations. And then also in the report, we do have the rest of the external committee appointments that are listed there. The policing review, just to note, that will carry over until the end of the review, and the IMSA pilot will also carry over till the end of the review. The others all get revisited on an annual basis. We do make a recommendation around the REN, but that wouldn't actually be effective until April 1st when we're actually a member. So the report is there for your information and discussion. And if you have any questions, let me know.
I have a question. In police services review, I don't chair, so maybe clean that up for council. It's got me as the chair.
Oh, does it? Yes.
That's you.
I will, yeah.
And do I understand you saying that when the new counselor is here, some of these, they will take some of the roles that have already been assigned? Yes.
Yes, so they will have to be fit in. There are some opportunities maybe with alternates, at least for the beginning of their term. There's no alternate being proposed right now for the WBDC as an example. That's one that that person could slot into. But there may be some opportunity that we will have to do a bit of rejigging once that person is settled. But for now, this is divided amongst the six.
Okay, Councillor Ingham?
Yeah, so you just mentioned alternate, so there's no, I don't see an alternate on accessibility. And I don't see an alternate on diversity, just looking at the committees I'm on. And so you have one listed, I think, I think I'm listed on KPPT as an alternate. And then I'm just looking for my committees and what I'm, wanting to do. So when a new counselor comes, are they going to bump off me as something that I really want to do? That's, or how is that going to work? And how many committees are they going to be on? Yeah, so should there, and also on Town and Gown, there is no alternate either. I know there's a mayor and a counselor, but there is no alternate. And as we talked about with the MOU, we would rather have it more often than twice a year. So should we have an alternate on that also?
So currently we don't do alternates for our own committees because we have enough representation internally with counselors. We haven't done alternates in the past for our own committees.
But accessibility, I think Jody was alternate last term.
Okay, with
Yeah.
that exception then, because we typically don't do that. So. Yeah, and it may be that the new counselor coming in, that might be a really good opportunity as an example to have that person serve as an alternate on many committees to just get exposed to a variety of different areas. And then when we revisit the committee appointments next fall, they would be considered as one of the 7. So there's different options that council can consider once we have that person in place as to where they slate. But we didn't, council's direction was let's do this now, and as opposed to waiting until that person's in place because you wanted some certainty with the calendar. So
Yeah.
we're doing it now, and then we can revisit with the new individual in winter.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a little bit in favor of like having consistency in the alternates on our committees. And I only say that because as you know, we're all busy. What happens is you get it put in the calendar. So if you're an alternate, that gets put in your calendar as a meeting. Otherwise, we have to sort of pick and choose what meetings we want to go to. So is it possible that we do have alternates like on committees that we only have one person? And I'm speaking of like Town and Gown, which is just one counselor. And then I'm also speaking on accessibility, which is just one counselor. And then if somebody's interested in that committee, they're able to join in with an invite in their calendar and knowing it's in their schedule.
So that's a decision of council on how you want to handle the alternates, and some direction to staff would be helpful on that. Town and Gown is legislated through the MOU right now, so I wouldn't suggest adding an alternate until we actually update the terms of reference, because it's very specific as to who sits on that committee at this point. But if you want to look at having alternates for our own individual committees that are committees of council, you can provide that direction and we can come back with some recommendations on who should fill that, or it could be the new candidate that will be coming in. Aside from from accessibility, we haven't done that. And the mayor does sit as a voting member on accessibility as well. So there are two that are there. And Mike may be able to give insight why we had an alternate on that. It may be the terms of reference that came down from the province, but we typically don't for.
Yeah, and I don't know off the top of my head, it may have been kind of a leftover from when the committee was initially set up through the help of the province. And I'd maybe suggest if there's the thought on the alternate, you might be able to do this as is right now. By the time we get to council in 2 weeks, start to identify who alternates would be, but that would be a different process. And I think accessibility was a bit of a one-off. So that's different than if you want alternates more widely spread throughout the committee structure. Because this is just internal committees here that we're talking alternates not being there.
Councillor McKay?
Thank you. I know this is going to come as a real shock to you, but I did a spreadsheet. With all of the committees and our names and how often they meet, just because I don't know, just because. It's who I am. I can't change that. Well, I'm gold, right? See? So Yeah. So when I look at it, and even though like sometimes I would say, all committees aren't created equal in terms of not only in frequency, but in terms of work, the amount that goes into it, audits, heavy reading, planning has heavy reading, things like that. So and I can send that to you later, just to
I have
show
one
it on.
too,
You do, yeah.
because
okay,
I'm a green gold.
yes. And I'm a gold green, see, so.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Not everybody.
Yeah. My question, so that's all fine. So I don't
Explains so much.
disagree with some of an alternate, or at least knowing if you're going to be put into a meeting, knowing ahead of time. I like that just for planning purposes. Following up to the discussion that we just had on diversity, and I was thinking about it when we did this. And I know the MOU legislates what we have for meetings. I think though, when we look at, and maybe we can bring it for discussion while we're talking about revamping the MOU, can we have, because we're underrepresented.
We are.
There is two, the board, their president, the ASU, a student rep. And then two of us.
Yeah.
One.
One community. member.
So we're certainly on the lesser end of representation. And as we go through the MOU, I wonder if we can add temporarily, whatever that might be. And I briefly mentioned it to Councilor Ingham just because it was her committee. I wondered if whether we label them as two or co-counsel, or we co-share diversity and town and gown. And I say that as we implement some of those things together, having a broader range on that topic, and just to bring the two together, perhaps, maybe. And if it came to a vote, clearly one would only vote or whatever. But just to kind of get more knowledge in those areas and how we could bridge those two together was kind of my thought. And because we're underrepresented on town and gown, would that be a way we could do it and move some initiatives forward? I don't know how that would work.
We might have a
semantics.
subcommittee because
Yeah.
you've sat on town and gown. We don't really talk about those kind of
No.
operational things.
No,
But I guess, I mean, got a whole blank slate with the
Right.
revision, so.
yeah, and I was just thinking if it was not, maybe it's not the committee, but as we talk about the MOU and have those discussions, could that be a place we add a person with that kind of thoughts?
It might make sense. So the Acadia is trying to get a town and gown meeting in place before the
I
break.
think it's the 13th.
Yeah, they're pulling some dates, partly because we wanted to get an update on where we're at with the MOU negotiations since we're well off our timeline. Also partly because as we go through the citizen appointments, it has to be ratified by the committee. So it'd be a really good opportunity on the 13th to actually talk to the town and gown about, in the interim, as we move forward, are there some changes to the structure that we can all agree on? So I think we could add that to the agenda at that point.
My suggestion would be that, and I don't know if that's okay with Councilor Ingham or not, but I was just trying to think of how we could bridge those two things and move that agenda item, but.
So that doesn't suggest a change to anything here at.
You want, yeah,
I guess it doesn't, we could move this as it is now, and when is our council meeting and when is the town and gown?
Town and gown will be before council, because I think the
13th.
Tuesday, next Tuesday, they're trying to get it town and gown.
Okay.
And then
Council's
council would
next
be the
week.
following Tuesday.
Okay, so I mean, we could approve it as it is now, and then after those two discussions happen, potentially bring that back as a small change
Sure. And
to council.
somebody meant diversity is not our committee, it's county's committees.
Right.
I thought that was being proposed that we try to.
The two separate things. So there's King's diversity, which we have now. And then we're talking about how diversity in Wolfville might fit into town and gown.
No, I understand that. I just thought.
Yeah.
There was a suggestion that we also approach diversity things about having two instead of just, but maybe I missed it.
No, that's
Yeah.
what you said, that is what I said.
Yeah,
not
and I will
necessar-
follow up with the county around Diversity Kings because I'm really not sure what their plans are with that committee now that none of the towns are partnering with them on their Inclusive Kings
We might
County.
not
So
be
they
on
may
it.
change their approach to that anyway. So I will have a conversation with their CAO before the next meeting just to see where his thoughts are at or if their council's discussed that yet.
I don't think we have yet.
Can I ask a
Councillor
question
McKay?
on that? Thank you. So if we are not, I'll call it a voting member on that committee, I'm not sure if they vote or not, but can you still, I guess, we could still go and attend and watch a meeting? Like, is that, I'm just trying to, just for educational purposes, to bring it back to our table if we're.
I think it's a good idea. Usually in Kentville, they have one counselor that they appoint, but it's oftentimes they have an alternate and I don't see an alternate on there, but the alternate is welcome to show up at any time and contribute on anything. Usually the voting is it's more of discussion that we have, roundtable discussions than any voting. So last night there was an alternate that came from Kentville. And so if we appoint an alternate, that would start right off and she could, go right away.
We
Yeah.
could make that change and appoint an alternate right now on
That's
diversity.
what I'm saying.
I think, but
So
the
she
town
can-
and gown.
Yeah. No, the town
need
again,
to
I don't,
take-
but if Jody was interested in that committee, and I'll, obviously it does make sense for me to stay on there, not knowing that if we're going to move forward on that committee or not. But she would have be able to go anytime that she wanted. It's a very open, people attend that committee all the time. But to have it in your calendar is kind of important too. Yeah, so I would be in favor of that. It would be nice to have somebody else there from Wolfville.
And maybe since we have to put another counselor on there, we could just hold that in advance, because we are going to have to take some people off of existing ones.
I was only suggesting that us almost count, just because it would carry the information from one to the other, if that made sense, from town and gown to.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That would make some sense, yes. Yes, we.
Yeah, I noted that because I think that would be one that the new counselor could slate in as the alternate.
Also VCFN could take that from me.
I just have a quick question. I have a quick question about the actual role of an alternate. Having an alternate is my understanding from being an alternate on KPPT was if the council representative couldn't attend that meeting, I was given the information and I was the representative at that meeting. The way the discussion is going now, it's almost like the alternate is going to attend regardless, just to stay informed. They could, but participation at that meeting, if the actual representative is there, isn't necessary, I guess. Which I think is better because as the alternate on KPPT, I only went to one meeting and I was completely uninformed of a lot of the discussion. So I couldn't even participate as the representative being there. So just having that option to be able to, I know there's probably no rules and regulations for alternates, but just being able to go and participate, whether you're the representative or not, I think it's just nice to know that in advance. I did not know that in advance, so.
I would also say that all of council can attend any of our meetings, even if you're not on the committee. I know in days past when Dan was our clerk, getting invitations to meetings and then not understanding why I did. But because he just sent to all of council, but certainly all of council can always come to any council meetings.
Yeah, and I think the role is really what you want to make of it. So the alternates, even on the external committees, are welcome to attend. They're all public meetings. And so some might be wanting to be more engaged on a regular basis and just go and listen than others. And it's really that choice. But you're right. The role is that if somebody can't attend, you fill in. But it's really great, I think, when an alternate does attend to listen, because it does keep everybody in the know. And then it's an easier transition when the person is not able to go and they need to have a fill-in. So.
Okay, we have some suggestions and we'll see this again when the new person is sitting here. I don't think we made any changes to that motion, but there's some good suggestions that we'll follow through. A mover, please, for that motion.
I can move.
Deputy Mayor.
I would move the committee of the whole for the following motion for council for decision, the council approve the council committee appointments as outlined in RFD 075-2022.
Thank you. And a seconder, please, Councillor Elliott. Any more discussion?
Can I just ask clarity? So are we adding Councillor McKay as the alternate to diversity on that? It doesn't change the motion. It's just referring to the attached RFD, or are we waiting? It wasn't clear. Sure.
Okay. Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's passed. Main Street, Devour Studios digital signage proposal.
Okay, good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm just one sec while I get set up here. Okay, so we're going to go through a development agreement proposal that went to Planning Committee in September. So we've held this application back a bit because we were directed by the Planning Committee to do some additional work at the Design Review Committee level. So this is the purpose of today's meeting. And when, just as a reminder, I guess, when these applications come to Committee of the Whole, you're really considering the recommendation of the Planning Advisory Committee. So generally, they were okay with this application, but wanted some further review by the Design Review Committee. And that's mostly because when we put this on the September agenda, there wasn't a lot of time to convene the Design Review Committee because the summer is just difficult to schedule people. So I think this has really benefited from that process. So what we're talking about here application-wise is a digital sign at the Devour Studios space. And really, I just want to emphasize that we're really talking about the digital component. If this was just a regular sign, we wouldn't be here. So if it didn't have the reader board screen, we wouldn't be here. So I just want to make sure that there's kind of a differentiation between the two. Everyone's familiar with the Devour sites right across the street from where we're sitting. Just somewhat quickly here, as far as policy review goes, our MPS allows us to consider this type of what I would call a unique and site-specific consideration at this site. And a development agreement, for those of you that maybe haven't been through these, we're essentially creating a land use bylaw for a site. So we're creating rules and regulations for either the whole site, or in this case, one very specific aspect of the site. So we're just talking about the sign. There is another note there I should mention. We do already regulate digital signage, but it's only on Acadia campus. So that was something that came out of the plan review, something that was already existing. Really relevant here is, because this is on Main Street, is our design guidelines and use of the Design Review Committee. So generally there's additional, I would say, scrutiny put on applications along our Main Street. And this is no different. There's a reason that we don't allow digital signage as of right in the downtown. So generally with as of right applications, it's something that we would all agree, and even anyone on the street would agree that we're okay with that. So the signage that you see going up through development permits is a reflection of that. Within our design guidelines, we do have a framework that we use when we work with the committee. This one is somewhat unique because it is just the sign on the building. So just with all of that in mind, and just as a comment, from my perspective, there has been a lot of design work done on this proposal. So we've been to the Design Review Committee 3 times. And I think it's appropriate, given the change and given some of the comments that we've received. So I do think that this does make for a tasteful addition. It is unique and site specific. And I don't think this would be appropriate in any application, and that's why we're doing a development agreement. So this is a really good use of a development agreement for those that maybe haven't been through this type of process. Obviously, the visibility of such a signage is important. So this is just some fairly high level analysis of as you're moving along the street. It's not right in your face. It's not right at the street edge. This is the first iteration of the sign. So this is a concept by the Devour team, and it's Vincent and Hartog who's been working through this for Michael and Leah and the Devour team. So this is pretty fun, and you know, using the fork as a kind of really expressive element on the sign. So this was the first review that we did with the design review committee. This is the proposal that went to the planning committee as well. After the first sort of review, it came back with what I would call like a more utilitarian usage of particularly the forks. The forks have become like the main element in this sign. The rest of it is, I would say, is fairly fine-grained detail, but I would cast your attention to the sides of the sign. So there was some question of whether that would be digital, and it won't be. So it's just the frontage facing Main Street. So there in the package, there's a couple of other renderings that you can see from the sides, but the sides, the underside of the canopy, some of that kind of detail has been more developed in the second iteration than this one. Just some other discussion. This is becoming months ago now, but this was sent around to WBDC membership. I would say that there was general support for it from the membership for council's information. There was some public feedback, mostly talking about character and what this sort of means for future applications. And then there was the design review discussion. So initially by email, then we've had 2 meetings. I think that group is generally in agreement with this. We're getting into very fine detail of the sign at this point. So we had to step back. The question here is whether we're okay with the digital signage, and can we design a development agreement that gives some flexibility? So that's what we've attempted to do here. So there are a number of provisions in the development agreement that cover things like flashing, noise, movement of images, how much it can be illuminated, as to what hours. And there was also a question around off-site advertising, which we've prohibited in the development agreement. So it would be things related to what's going on in that complex. And then the flexibility around the design. So essentially, I think what we'll see as a final product is some combination of those 2 versions. I think that generally, when the second version came in, most people liked the first version, just from a design review committee perspective. And I think a lot of people were thinking of this as a really a landmark piece in the town, similar to the Acadia Theater. So just to wrap up, this has been a substantial process to get to this point. This is for a development agreement, what we call initial consideration. So we would move this to a public hearing after this, and council would make a decision after the public hearing. So between this meeting and the public hearing, we as staff usually finalize the development agreement language. So there probably wouldn't be any big surprises or changes in the development agreement, but we would certainly be fine-tuning the language with our legal. We then schedule and advertise for the public hearing. So at this point, it would be after Christmas, obviously, because there's a window of advertising that's required. And yeah, I think I'll conclude there. The motion to move this to a public hearing is included. Thank you.
So questions of staff?
I have a question. The the highlighted portion of the development agreement proposal, 5.1.3.9, I think it's missing some letters. And I just wanted to get clarification. It's like the T stopped
noticed.
working on the
Yeah.
keyboard. But is it just the T? So it should say submit the operational specification at the time of permit application?
Yes,
Okay.
and what happened there, just for information, is when I cut that out of a requirement that we have as part of the Acadia signage.
Okay.
And when it transferred into the other document, there was some type of error. So these are the types of things that as we go to legal with this DA, we will certainly be cleaning up. If there's probably some other typos or
It was
language
just
in
that
there.
one. I was just like, am I reading that wrong? And then I did have a question. I love that there's going to be a public hearing because I've heard a lot about this from the public. Where the WBDC was concerned with those that voted and those that were against it, will businesses also be consulted in some sort of survey or something? Or is that just included in the public input portion? Because I know this is pretty unique for this particular business, and it's not an advantage that every business can take. And I know there was quite a bit of discussion once the sidewalk sign thing was done, that it was taking away from businesses. You follow up after the CFL game that businesses felt that things weren't done like, it seems like there's a bit of favoritism put specifically on this area. I know it's a special spot, but will businesses be consulted on this just as much as the public, or is it all just kind of lumped into one?
We sent this out specifically to the businesses through the WBDC. So we have comments that we received from the businesses. They're high level summarized here. So people were generally in support of this, of the people that responded. So, it's a kind of, we're asking and people have to participate. But the public hearing is certainly another opportunity if people would like to come and speak for or against this.
Thank you. So I just want some clarity. So is that the final, is this what the final rendering will look like, which is the two forks? The two forks, solid on the sides, no fork on top.
No, that's where we're providing some level of flexibility, is there'll be some fork element. It may not, it may not be the two on the side, there may be one on the top, but at this point, for this discussion, I'm not sure, unless council has a really strong opinion that you want an angled fork on the top of the sign, for instance.
Okay.
Right, so.
So then, well, it was kind of a bit about the fork, but a bit about the elevation of the whole sign as well, because if you start putting forks or utensils on the top of it, it starts to get higher, because I wouldn't want to see it any higher than this. I guess it's like, this is what it looks like, and we start putting objects into the sky. I think it's a little odd looking. But especially, yes, exactly. So I'm not sure about that. So I really actually don't like the one at the top, but and I don't like the elevation of it. I think it's not necessarily the fork is there, it's the elevation of it all. I think that if it's going to be an illuminated sign that changes, that keeping it just sort of as it is right in this, what it looks like, the details of it, I guess, are up to them, but that sort of facade. I appreciate the light outputs because I think it would get quite bright. And then would be detracting from Main Street too. So I think that, but I mean, it's a cinema. So I think it has a cinematic feel to it. So I think that would be all right. But my question was more on the elevation of it all. And no, and when it says don't promote anything on the outside, so would there be things like happy holidays? Like, would they be allowed to do things like that on the front? Are those things ever changing, or is it just simply what is in that building and nothing generic to the town, say?
I think a generic message that presumably is coming from that facility, it would be fine. It's, there's something happening in New Minas tonight. Yeah. I do want to just make one comment to follow up on that. So I do want to be clear that The design review committee certainly liked this one more. Okay, as we went through this with an element on the top, and we then discussed this one. And so I think as we get through this discussion, and I can go back and we'll have a public hearing, and we can see how this plays out for the decision at the end, because we may want to provide a little more direction. But I think if you're comfortable today moving this forward, some of that will come out in the details as we hear more at the public hearing.
Yes, good. I would recommend that Committee of the Whole forward the following motion to council for a decision. That the Committee of the Whole, oh wait, am I repeating myself here?
Committee. Well, it's,
That council,
no,
oh wait,
you're right. This was so that just put council in, because you've already said committee of the whole.
right.
The council recommend the development agreement.
Just a sec, yeah. The council recommend the development agreement application to erect a digital marquee sign at Devour Studios at 360 Main Street be forwarded to a public hearing before a decision is made on the application by council.
A seconder, please. Councillor Elliott, are there any comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Thank you, Director Lake. And fire department pumper truck. Director McLean, are you going to do that?
I think that's me. Won't spend a lot of time on this, although it's a little unusual in terms of the request. If you had a chance to look at the RFD. We have pumper trucks throughout the next 10 years that need to, or fire trucks that need to be replaced. The first one is a pumper truck that is now 20 years old. We talked a bit about this at the budget meeting. The costs are going up and the lead time to order to have something 2 years out is basically, we're entering into that window now. So typically council approves spending authority in 1 year increments, even though we plan longer. So this is before you because this particular pumper truck needs to be replaced out a couple of years. So we're seeking council approval to start the process to do that prior to the budget year that'll happen. That's the basis of this RFD. And I think there's enough information in there in terms of the costs. I've made some references to our current budget, approved budget document, so you can go back to find the page references. But this is essentially to let the chief and the fire department to start the process. So we're hoping to, starting it now will ensure that we can get it delivered in the year that it's intended. Replacing fire trucks is not particularly optional. We need the trucks, they need the gear. This one's 20 years old. And there is an opportunity right now. The chief's been talking to a couple other local departments. They are also starting to look, so we may get the benefit of being a combined sort of tender spec out with a couple of the manufacturers. So there's a couple benefits starting this one's early, and in order to get it in that future budget year as planned, we need to go ahead from council to do so. Make sense?
Councillor McKay is still the chair of audit.
Yes, I would move this, please. I would move that committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision that council authorize staff to formally begin the procurement process for the acquisition of a new pumper truck for the fire department with an expected delivery date in the 2024-25 fiscal year.
Thank you. The seconder, as the incoming chair, Councillor Butler, are there any questions? Comments? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, so that is passed. Now, we have a conference report. Is there anything else you'd like to add to your report, Councillor Ingham?
No, I think I covered a lot of things. I just want to say it was really fun and it was really encouraging to see all the youth involved in recreation. And, I met a lot of people and just all the discussions that we had today, it's just so vital that you see that that's what recreation is discussing, all the EDI components and, their anti-racism charter, all of that is fitting in and how they're moving forward. So that was really encouraging. There wasn't a lot of counselors there, but it was interesting to provide to provide to, when I was talking to people from a counselor's perspective on how we see things. So that was beneficial to people from other communities and municipalities. And I just want to give a shout out to our Nick Zamora and Beverly Cassidy for their presentation on the Memory Cafe. And, you know, it was well done. And I know from talking to Dr. Cassidy that this wouldn't have been possible without the town of Wolfville and the support of Nick, who she would say that I did not know how to put grants in. And, you know, it was very simple for Nick to do. So they were a really good team. And, you know, it was good to see Wolfville represented. So I was pretty proud on that. So shout out to staff and Beverly and that.
No, there used to be a counselor on a number of years ago on that board, so
Yeah.
you could aspire to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee reports, external. Councillor Butler, anything you'd like to add to Kings Point to Point? No? Councillor Ingham, anything you would like to add to Diversity Kings?
Yeah, just a meeting last night. So they're pretty close to hiring the 2 diversity specialists. They got a lot of applicants and they're really happy with the quality. So that should be taking place in the new year. So hopefully soon we'll see who they are.
And the IMSA board, I have nothing to add to that. We are meeting again a week or so, next week, I forgot, kind of every 2 weeks. So that is moving ahead. I don't know if everybody is aware, but King's Transit's general manager has moved on. And so we are in the interim. Dwight Wynot is kind of looking after some more things. There's a couple of new operations staff, and I believe CAOs have reached out to a former CAO who will be there to provide some direction, not as an acting, but am I correct in that? Did that happen?
Yeah, there was some outreach and that required that individual is available.
Anyways, things are moving along, and but that was a bit of a surprise, but just to update you. And I think Michael has gone to Maritime Bus, correct? So we wish him well in that. All right, that brings us to Amanda. Are there any people chomping at the bit to come in for public input? Amanda? Amanda? No, okay, I would guess
Sorry.
not. I would guess there's nobody who wants to speak.
There isn't. Sorry, I couldn't get my button to work here.
Okay, and assuming not also from the gallery. So if I could have a motion to adjourn to in camera under contract and personnel, please. Thank you, Councillor Butler, Councillor Ingham. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. So we are going to go in camera.